Welcome to my channel. My name is Ангеліна Krikheli. I am a writer from Ukraine. This is my first experience of my audiobooks in English, so I need your support with subscription and comments. I write books from the bottom of my heart with love. I plan to post the books in full, but chapter by chapter.
Ангеліна Krikheli, Deceptive Love. Read by Tetiana Kovalchuk. Chapter 1. Lady, miss, wait! The young man, smiling cockily and openly, overtook her and confidently extended his hand to the grocery bag. Varvara frowned tiredly, not understanding what the stranger expected from her. He didn't look like a beggar, too well and expensively dressed, and not everyone can afford such perfume. Since both hands were busy, she pushed the trunk with her elbow and it slid down smoothly, taking its rightful place. The car alarm beeped and the headlights blinked hello. There was an awkward silence. "Let me help you," the guy said less confidently. Vara finally realized what was going on. She grinned sadly and set the accents straight. "I'm sorry, but I don't get acquainted on the street." But he kept up. "Where do you meet?" he asked and tilted his hat playfully to the side. Somehow he reminded her of Mashenka from the cartoon. It even seemed that in the next moment he would ask, "And how do you know each other? And why do you know each other? And when do you know each other?" And with what else she was bothering the suffering bear. Vara involuntarily smiled. She thought that he probably simply didn't see her from behind, and now it was awkward to leave. He sees that she is older. But instead of apologizing for the misunderstanding and saying goodbye, he suddenly changed in his face, becoming serious and as if even grow up, and decisively took all the bags from her hands. She hadn't waited for anyone else for a long time, but the habit of shopping on Saturday for the whole week persisted. It was as if her subconscious was trying to give her a sting every time. Then she'd cook some goodies and give half of them to her neighbors or take them to the orphanage. "I can't do it all by myself. My wife won't carry such heavy things." He frowned, staring at Varvara. She opened her eyes wide in surprise. Then she grinned good-naturedly and tried to turn the awkward situation into a joke. "I envy your wife, young man. But somehow I didn't want to drive him away or look away. He was magnetically attracted to me." "There is no point in envying yourself," the young man replied seriously and then asked, "Where should I take it?" And again she could not find the strength to object. Perhaps his charisma had played a cruel trick on her, turning a strong woman into an obedient rabbit in an instant. Later, of course, she would find an excuse and console herself with the fact that it was all the fault of simple female fatigue. Now she simply pointed to the door of the entrance of the housing complex and obediently followed him when he nodded and headed in the given direction. The woman involuntarily admired his broad shoulders, confident, not at all youthful gait, proud posture, and the ease with which he carried her heavy burden. At the door, the boy stopped, nodded again. He waited for her to remove the magnetic key from the bag. The intercom beeped, opening the door. Vara suddenly thought it could be a thief, a maniac, or even a murderer. She looked into his bottomless golden brown eyes and sank. Her own reasoning suddenly cheered her up. "If it's a thief, well, All he can steal from her is money. She'll earn it back. That kind of loss doesn't scare her. If it's a maniac, it's more complicated, of course. Apparently, a slightly crazy smile spread across her face. "What made you so happy?" he said, holding the door open with his shoulder and letting her go through. "The you thing. Insolent, but charming," and she didn't object again. His deep, penetrating voice was a healing balm to her wounded heart. After saying hello to the old lady concierge, Varya, suddenly elated and soared, rushed into the elevator car. The stranger continued to smile understandably and a little starting, standing next to her in a tight, confined space. "It's hot today, stuffy." Having gone up to her floor, Varvara stopped confusedly, near the door of her apartment. She could not invite him in. He looked at the door, carefully unloaded the bags at the threshold, and suddenly touched her cheek with his warm lips in an innocent and so pleasant kiss. "Good. See you tomorrow, Varya," he said, and tapped his demi-seasonal shoes on the steps downstairs. The woman woke up. She bent over the railing. "Wait! How do you know my name?" But he was too far away to hear, or simply pretended not to hear. There was no reply. This acquaintance was taking a very different turn. It was one thing for an amused young man to be deceived and decide to make an acquaintance with a pretty young woman. And quite another, how does he know her? More importantly, why can't she remember him then? The kind of man she would remember. You don't forget a man like that. And he's not what you'd call handsome by any fashionable standard. But to go away, to stop looking at him, not to listen to him, is hardly possible. Overwhelmed by the incomprehensible meeting, she entered the apartment and froze in surprise. "Venya, what are you doing here?" Chapter 2. Her ex-husband was sitting in her favorite and therefore quite worn-out armchair by the window. He looked like he was supposed to be here, not with his mistress. It was with her that Varvara caught him on his marriage bed a year ago. Having recovered from the shock, she then the very next day changed the phone number and filed for divorce. But not only to move out promptly didn't work. It turned out that the apartment taken jointly in the mortgage is still not paid, contrary to the assurance of her husband. You can't sell it, which means it's impossible to move out quickly. Needless to say, in a common firm, created at one time from scratch by joint efforts, where she headed the financial department, now didn't want to go. To face every day with a long-legged secretary separate, a dubious pleasure. So it was necessary to solve two global issues at once, housing and work. Sometimes saved money could help her, but they are not infinite. However, Veniamin then appeared with repentance and offered her to stay in the apartment with the promise to pay the remaining 10% of mortgage payments. As moral damage, of course. After hesitating a bit, Varya agreed. Practically overcame resentment. What was the use of cherishing wounded pride and broken love on a street? But the assurances of love and pleas for forgiveness passed her ears. There is no turning back from betrayal. A month later, a chance meeting with a colleague brought her the news of the dismissal of the very beauty. Varya was surprised to find that does not feel gloating, deceived wife from the restoration of justice. Even felt sorry for the girl, but the old feelings for her husband didn't stir, as if dead or asleep inside. She had always considered herself as a woman without a light, and now even the crumbs of smoldering embers were extinguished. But Venya didn't want to give up and periodically came home under various plausible pretexts. Vara laughed wickedly at him, finding soon that she quickly learned to live again, and he can calmly perceive as a friend with a common past. It didn't work out that way for him. Therefore, the man periodically started a charm with a song about the restoration of the family life. The divorce papers didn't cool his ardor either. Vara, well, a man made a mistake. Well, who doesn't happen to? With me, said Vara, and looked angrily at the already former spouse. Now he was back in her chair with her mug in his hands in her apartment. After paying the mortgage, he officially formalized the gift, returning to his parents for a while. After all, he knew perfectly well that Vara had nowhere to go back to. Then, the woman tiredly scratched out, putting the bags on the table before he came to his senses and rushed to help her. What happened again? We discussed everything with you and agreed long ago that you would only show up with an invitation to your wedding. Get your own life together. That's what I'm here for, cheerfully responded ex-husband. For what? To invite to the wedding? Varvara asked glumly. No, to arrange my life with you. In confirmation of his words, he nodded his head vigorously. Vara realized that it would be for a long time. She sighed humbly and went to prepare dinner. At least there would be someone to feed. She loved to cook and could do it with taste and soul. Venya loved to eat it all, with no less flavor and soulfulness. It had once delighted her, seemed like a fragment of a family idyll. Shaking her head, she pushed away the sad memories. I can feed you, she said bluntly. I have nothing more to give you. Well, we're even now, the man grinned, sitting down on the bar stool at the counter. Vara frowned, put the food away and turned to the guest, putting her hands to her sides. I didn't cheat on you, she narrowed her eyes and went on the offensive. My affair with Rostislav happened 6 months after our divorce. So what? I don't see the difference, the ex said, as always, discouragingly, and started tapping his fingers on the tabletop. After he had moved out, Vara had renovated and redone everything to her liking. He liked the new style, but now he no longer felt like he was on his own turf. Vara just waved him off. It was pointless to argue with him, but the image of a man with whose help he was going to overcome the mental torment of a broken family life obligingly popped up in her memory. Instead, she had faced another betrayal, finally deciding never to trust men again. Leaving both faces in the past, Vara became harder, stronger, more confident, and even more lonely. Sighing heavily, the woman sank into the chair opposite Veniamin. Why do you poison my soul every time? Well, disappear, please, she begged. You remind me not love, but your own inadequacy. Why do men allow themselves to lie to me? Veniamin immediately became serious and sympathetically stroked her palm. Varichka, I still love you. Well, let's try again. It's not going to work out with others anyway. So that's what this is all about. Varvara raised her head and laughed. Tell me, Don Juan, who you didn't have a big, bright feelings for this time? She knew that this conversation would drag on into the evening, as it had done so many times before. Then Venya would try to stay the night. It would take her a long time to get him out, and when she closed the door, she would slide back down it again and burst into tears about everything that had gone wrong. Only one thing told her something would change this evening. It seems to those golden-brown sparkling eyes of the mysterious young man standing before her mind's eye would keep her from mourning her twice-broken heart. Chapter 3. Sundays usually brought people rest and peace. But Vara didn't consider herself as a religious or deeply religious person. She had no family or pets. She had no additional skills except perfect knowledge of her profession. Handicrafts were considered a waste of time. If one read, it was to improve one's skills. Television is evil to the mind and just idly hanging around the streets. She wasn't good at walking. Even as a child, while her peers were having fun on the playground right in front of her nose, she had to sit in the gazebo. One day, out of nothing to do, she took up counting. She was so engrossed that she didn't even notice how she became a pro in everything that had to do with numbers. So today she had to work all day long so that tomorrow she could go to work again. She didn't like it, by the way. It seemed too routine and stultifying. It wouldn't take long to lose her skills by performing monotonous, simple tasks. It was time for a change. She was on her way to the bathroom when she heard the doorbell ring. Frowning angrily, she tightly wrapped the silk rope over the nightgown and headed for the door. "Venya, I told you that." Vara started swinging the door open with a single jerk and stopped. On the threshold stood the same young man. The smile seemed to never leave his beautiful shaped lips and never melted in his eyes. Raised an eyebrow interestedly. "Who is Venya?" "My ex-husband," Vara answered obediently. Then she woke up and pulled a mask of righteous indignation on her face, trying to hide her embarrassment. She imagined herself from the outside, sleepy, braid disheveled, face unwashed. I groaned mentally at the impossibility of changing anything right away. But in the next moment she straightened up and even smiled, folding her arms menacingly across her chest. Let him see what he's gotten himself into. Maybe he'll let it go. He seemed to be amused by the metamorphosis that was happening to her. "Vara, I'll be waiting for you in the car. We have plans for today. Can you manage in half an hour?" he asked, raising his hand with his watch. Varvara noticed that the watch was handmade. She had once looked for a similar one for her husband. But when she learned its value, she realized that such a gift could entail the sale of not a car. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were a sleepyhead," he said with a sly wink and headed for the stairs. Objections hung in the air unspoken. Closing the door, I stared silently at the small wall mirror in the hallway. What was happening seemed crazy. So here we are. One very persistent and charming young man who you follow before you even think about where you're going and why. I have to think, though, this rat catcher no one dozen ladies led to a secluded corner. An extremely intriguing mystery. And one Sunday from the number of meaningless and empty weekends. Vara grinned and looked at her watch and rushed to the bathroom to make up. After all, she is a mature, experienced woman. Absolutely nothing is lost by flirting with a nice young man. It doesn't commit her to anything and she can always walk away at any time. Having reasoned in this way, flew into her favorite comfortable ballet flats 2 minutes before the end of the time allotted for packing, hurriedly closed the door and impatiently drummed on the elevator button. The young man was waiting for her at his car. Leaning back against it, he listened to Chopin nocturnes coming from the open salon. Slowing down a little at the exit, Vara easily made her way toward him. "God, what am I doing?" she asked herself, but she couldn't stop. "I'll find out where we know each other from, and then I'll go home. At least I'll have some entertainment for this dreary day." He perked up, as if snapping out of the obviously unhappy thoughts that made him look so much older. He smiled a familiar smile, but Vara stubbornly shook her head. "I'm not going anywhere with you. I just want to know how you know me." He grinned understandingly. "Great motivation to go on a little road trip with me," he replied, and winked slyly at her, pointing to the passenger seat next to the driver. The impressive size of the car was a little intimidating to Vara, but at the same time it inspired confidence and deprived her of fears for safety on the road. After all, she was afraid to even sit down in an overly lightweight car, let alone drive out on the road. Varvara nodded doubtfully and awkwardly climbed into the car. "Where are we going?" she couldn't resist asking, as soon as the door closed and the driver took his seat. The cabin felt crowded. He seemed to fill the whole space. The question of acquaintance is no longer primary, he sniggered. My name is Sasha, by the way. Very nice to meet you, Vara responded vividly, mentally slapped herself on the forehead, annoyed at another oversight. We are going out of town. Nothing outstanding or extravagant. Just shashlik, the river, fishing and lots of fresh air. I won't hurt you. Alexander drove the car confidently, holding the steering wheel with one hand. Do I look so bad? Vara perked up. I'm sorry, I have to take this call, he said seriously. Vara only now noticed no less massive than everything in his machine. Built-in display on which the call with the foreign code was silently lit up. Ja, ich höre zu. Nein, diese Unterlagen brauchte ich schon gestern. Bis morgen kann ich nicht warten, sonst geht die Bestellung an meiner Nase vorbei. Beeilen Sie sich bitte. Yes, I'm listening. No, I needed these documents yesterday. I can't wait until tomorrow. Otherwise, the order will get out from under your nose. Hurry up. Having disconnected the call, Sasha looked thoughtfully at the road. Is everything all right? Vara asked worriedly. It seems that the vacation will not turn out to be so cloudless as we would like, and I will need your help. Help? She repeated absurdly. Yes, I need to look at some documents and find a mistake in them. I don't understand, Varvara whispered confusedly. You're the best financier I know, Sasha calmly explained, driving down a country road. In the meantime, they had managed to drive not far, but still outside the city. Who are you? Vara asked, almost frightened. And why do you know so much about me and I know nothing about you? There's no secret. He shrugged, parking in front of a small but rather nice and cozy house surrounded by fruit trees. The man turned to her face, still with one hand on the steering wheel. You just forgot. I'll remind you. In my last year of university, our supervisor invited a lot of interesting people and professions, gave us quests, complicated plots, and wisely watched us get out of carefully laid traps with supposedly obvious solutions on our own. It didn't get any clearer, Vara grumbled. You came to our law school, a successful financier, almost genius. I was blown away. I wanted to meet you then, but I noticed the ring on your finger just in time. I suppose so, she nodded, agreeing. But how did you find it now? You won't believe it, Sasha suddenly cheered up. But it was an accident. A happy accident. After studying, I ran away from my family in Germany for internship. There I got hooked, opened my own company. I wanted to be independent of my family, but my soul ached. I wanted to go home. I decided to take a vacation. I get there. I see you in the parking lot of a supermarket on my first day. No assistant, no ring, no energy, no mood. He gave the woman a deep, understanding look that went straight to her soul. How could this young man contain so much observation and even wisdom? So you just need my help with the documents? Vara exhaled simultaneously with relief and chagrin, struck by a hunch. Sasha laughed openly and infectiously. No, Vara, I'm seriously going to marry you, and I advise you to just accept this idea and take it as a given. Resentment surged in her. Feeling of helplessness came over her. Then another situation came to mind where they tried to make a decision for her and not in her favor. But that was a huge state apparatus that had snatched away from the orphanage the opportunity to find her own corner after graduation. This is different. She can and will fight for her right to choose. That's ridiculous, Vara snorted. You've seen me twice in your life. You think you know everything about me and can control my life? What kind of nonsense is that? Vara, was all he said, shaking his head. And the way he said the name alone superseded all the affectionate words the other had used to convey their feelings for her. It's not like that, Vara, but now I really needed your help. Varvara looked at him thoughtfully and answered, Well, then let's deal with things first and then we'll talk. She resolutely opened the door and stepped onto the damp grass in front of the house with unexpected pleasure. Chapter 4. Sasha helped her to get comfortable in the wicker chair under the apple tree. Despite the warm weather in this time of the year, it was cool in nature. Closing her eyes with pleasure, Vara simply inhaled the fresh air with her full chest and could not get enough of it. Strange things were happening to her in his presence. It was as if only now, suddenly, of all a sudden, she began to live, to feel. It was as if someone had opened an invisible valve and turned all her senses on full blast. Surprised at herself, she caught the slightest rustle of the wings of flighty sparrows, listened to the gentle rustle of leaves above her head, and inhaled with pleasure the smell of freshly cut grass. The boy was obviously tending the garden. Varvara woke up, feeling his gentle touch. The guy smiled understandingly, covering her legs with a light plaid. Then he sat down on the grass in front of her, crossing his legs and locking his hands together. A sun bunny danced on his face. It seemed to Vara that she herself would dance now, easily and cheerfully. But she had always been considered a heavy person, too practical and therefore boring. "You feel it too, don't you?" shrewdly clarified the young man, gazing inquisitively into her eyes. Varvara remained silent. She blinked fearfully, not knowing how to react to her new, incomprehensible state. "When you walked into our classroom, I experienced something similar, as if I had never felt anything before you." "Sasha," the woman said confusedly, "but you're still very young. It's just, I was just tired, and here," she circled the space with her hand. "Nature, air, your attention. I've seen you for the second time in my life. It doesn't happen like that." Sasha shook his head slowly, smiling enigmatically. "Vara, listen to me. You may not believe me, but you can't disbelieve yourself. Love at first sight happens. Rarely, but it happens. The puzzles fit, the two halves meet and immediately feel it. And age," he snickered, getting up from his seat and tucking his hands into his pants pocket, "it's just a number. And then, how old are you?" "That's not a tactful question," Vara pouted. "Come on, I need to know the age and date of birth of my future wife." Sasha easily waved away. 33, she muttered quietly. "That's all?" snorted the man, visibly relaxing. "Vara, I'm already 25, and you're still only 33. Varvara smiled furtively, but she immediately restrained herself. Yes, something strange was happening to her in his presence. And she liked those feelings, so she could not lie to herself. But it's all too surreal. It doesn't happen in reality. "Sashenka," she said affectionately, as if she was addressing a child. He immediately frowned unhappy. "In 10 years, you'll be only 35, and I'm already 43. A bliss will pass. You will want to see next to you not young, but a young and full of strength girl." Vara blinked in surprise, feeling the salty moisture on her face. The confused eyes of Veniamin flicked with the haze of passion and the triumphant smile of the secretary in her bed. Somehow then, it did not touch so much at this moment. Then Veniamin's face in her mind was replaced by Sasha's. And after all, with her ex-husband, they met since their students' days, then married and built a bright future together, creating their own company. Maybe it was all about a strange, inexplicable spark warming from within. It wasn't there then, and now. No, any spark only makes a fire that burns everything around it to the ground. Those extremes were clearly not good for her. She shook her head, pushing the intrusive thoughts away. Sasha looked at her with the eyes of a mature man who had seen a lot in his life. But from where? At his age. You probably think that I don't know much about real life at that age, he began shrewdly. And I'm not even going to debunk that myth. At least not right now. I often suffer from the discrepancy between reality and my passport, but when you get to know me better, he stopped talking. Then he changed dramatically in his face, becoming cheerful and carefree again like a boy. And now I'll do the kebab. You can make a vegetable salad, there's plenty in the trunk, or you can look around the house. Then we'll have a wonderful time. You can help me with the paperwork, and in the morning we'll go fishing. Tomorrow is Monday, Varya said indignantly. I have to go to work. For some reason, the prospect of spending the night with a man she didn't know frightened her less than truancy. Tomorrow is a national holiday. You work too much, he snorted. He rolled up his sleeves and began to unload the trunk with pleasure. It seemed bottomless to Varya, judging by the amount of stuff taken out of the car. She enjoyed watching the man's labor, the work of the muscles of his strong arms, which obviously knew physical labor. What kind of man was he? She caught herself smiling memorized, looking at him almost uninterruptedly while cutting vegetables. Warmth and sweet longing flowed in her chest, as if in anticipation of New Year's magic. Only everyone dreams about it, but no one has seen it. Humming, she begged Sasha to give her the documents. She didn't want to explore his house without him. She didn't want to do anything without him. She was in no hurry to admit it, being surprised at herself, scolding herself. He's just a boy. What his parents would say. A grown-up aunt decided to fool a boy's head? Well, okay, but she's not 25. Angrily restraining herself once again from looking at Alexander's embossed back. It was hot at the brazier, and he took off his shirt, tying it around his waist. I immersed myself in the familiar world of numbers. It was necessary to find a discrepancy. As Sasha explained, these few pages contained the whole case, which would either fall apart in court or be built on the facts of fraud. Varya found the discrepancy. Engrossed in her favorite business, she didn't even notice that he was now looking at her, with tenderness and love which only a soul full of feelings is capable of. The woman rubbed her hands together happily, tossing the plate aside. Cleverly, skillfully, hidden comma. She had to reread and recalculate several times to find the discrepancy. Yes, Sasha, I found it, she exclaimed. He shuddered with surprise and immediately headed towards her. Now tell me to the uninformed, only in simple language, what exactly is wrong here? Business tone and focused expression of his face again transformed him, putting in front of Varya not a young man in love, but a serious, mature man. After listening to her somewhat confused explanations, he nodded thoughtfully, reviewed the papers once more on his own. He thanked her very discreetly and put them away in the black leather briefcase, then went to the driver's seat. Alexander returned to the brazier and began to arrange the meat on plates. Maybe you can tell me what it was? Varvara asked, cautiously coming closer. For some reason, it seems to her that these papers were dirty, that something unpleasant was connected with them. She couldn't explain this irrational apprehension, but she didn't want Sasha to be in danger, to have anything to do with it. That was what she said, unable to keep silent. But there was another feeling, that this was not the first time for him and he was much more dangerous than he wanted to appear. She shuddered at the sudden gust of wind and fear and wrapped her arms gingerly around her shoulders. Scared? Sasha cheered up, again putting on his shirt and not buttoning it. Come here, do not be afraid. He drew her back to him, put one arm around her waist, and with the other hand continued to lay out the meat. These are very serious people indeed, I'd even say solid, he explained calmly. And I don't want to interfere, but they came to my office. I don't want to seem immodest, but in certain circles, everyone knows that in the most complicated cases, you need not just a lawyer, but the best lawyer, if I turn them down. He thoughtfully turned the already empty skewer in his hands. Vara, still not recognizing herself, launched in her unpretentious embrace, feeling for the first time a reliable protection and support, a warm cocoon in which she wanted to melt. And if I don't refuse, his dialogue seems to have devolved into an eternal argument where either solution was a stalemate. Which option is safer for you? Vara asked quietly, fixing an absolutely selfish unwillingness to lose these new sensations closely connected with him. Sasha laughed softly, calmly put the skewer aside and, turning her to face him, kissed her tenderly and sensually. Not hurried, possessive cares caused in her such a flurry of emotions that she almost suffocated from the boiling lava of passions. So that was it. She'd never believed it could be like this. Breaking away briefly from the painfully desirable lips, Sasha honestly admitted, I myself didn't think that this happens. It's like a wave. To the noise in my ears, to the gnashing of teeth. It just comes over me and that's it. I want to be with you. I want to be in you. And I can't do anything with myself. Vara's whole body trembled at what she heard, pressing herself tighter against him, clearly feeling the confirmation of his words. It always seems to her that conjugal duty was a necessary part of family life, to keep friendship and respect from falling apart, but now she herself reached for him for a new batch of kisses. Sasha gently embraced her instead, stroking her head leisurely. Vara was even startled that it was such a bad kiss and he didn't like it. The mat will get cold. Did I try for nothing? Jokingly shamed him without pulling away. Don't worry about the paperwork. I'll take care of it. It's not the first time. Varvara nodded obediently, wrapping her arms around his waist. She wanted to be a part of him right now, once and for all. Scared of her own desires, the woman gently pulled away and caught her warm gaze, liquid gold penetrating into her heart. I love you, Vara, he stated simply, kissing her lightly on the forehead and pulling her close to him again so that she wouldn't spoil this moment with another doubt. Chapter 5. Sasha smiled sadly, feeling her tense up fearfully at his words. She remained silent. Of course, he understood everything. Some man showed up, said he loved her at first sight and expected reciprocation. And what does she, so mature and experienced, know about love? It turns out she knows nothing. She flushed at the mere kiss. He looked thoughtfully at Vara, releasing her from his embrace, and sat at the table in the small gazebo near the house. Good manners, ingrained from childhood, were annoying. I wanted to send to her nice napkins, glasses, dozens of spoons and forks for each dish separately. Who invented to complicate everything so much? But alas, habits have become ingrained to the point of automatism, so as not to upset my mother or make my father angry. The thought of them made him frown. The man felt her timid, a little shy touch on his face. Vara was trying to smooth the frown lines on his forehead, and she looked at him so warmly that all the heartache that has stirred up like muddy sludge and in old street basin was instantly overshadowed. He caught her palm with his hand, fixing it on her cheek, kissing each finger slowly and gazing into her eyes. He noted with satisfaction how her almost maternal tenderness had instantly transformed into femininity and passion. Had no one told her, had no one shown her the fire within her, how sensual she could be? Fools! But he will definitely fix everything. Alexander decided firmly, stopping the innocent caress, which threatened to turn into the sweet torture for both of them. Varya, I have to go back to Germany in a month, he began, seating himself in the gazebo across the table. The day flew by strangely unnoticed. The crickets had already started their trills in the low grass. The moon naughtily put one foot out of the veil of the evening sky for all to see, obviously wanted to tempt the sun. But it was already rolling home toward the horizon, and hardly noticed the enchantress day after day trying to meet him. Varvara twitched faintly. She glared at him, but remained silent. I work for myself, but I also have obligations to other people, Sasha explained almost quietly. I knew you were married, and I thought you were happy. I wouldn't pry into your life. I didn't believe in chance meetings until yesterday. I understand, Varya nodded, drooping. She smiled bitterly in her mind. So he calls her his wife and then says goodbye immediately. Ridiculous situation. And the main thing is that she herself is ridiculous in her desire to cling to him with a tick and follow a man she hardly knew. Sasha shook his head. You are wrong to jump to conclusions. I want you to come with me, he said, and immediately met with a surprised look of dark green eyes. It's a bad idea to get married in a hurry. In a month you can close up your business here and come away with me. Why don't you want to return to your hometown? Cautiously clarified Varvara, afraid to believe him and desperately beating wings thousands of butterflies of happiness settled inside. Apart from you, nothing keeps me here. He simply shrugged his shoulders but looked away. What about your family? Alexander sighed heavily and leaned against the back of the wooden bench. Family, I have a pretty good relations with them, but we've never had been a family in the full sense of the word. Let's not ruin our first night, and then I'll introduce you guys anywhere. It's the way it's supposed to be, and we'll get acquainted with your family before we leave. Varya smiled embarrassedly. I have only my ex-husband Veniamin among my relatives, she grinned. Sasha also grinned at her wording revived. By the way, what did you say to him yesterday? Varvara tried to find words for the streamlined explanations so as not to go into details, but could not. So she answered honestly and simply. We divorced a year ago. He cheated on me with our secretary in our home. Now he's trying to get his family back together. She smiled tiredly, hearing herself as if from the outside. Funny. An impulse, she reached across the desk to her companion. He willingly squeezed her palms in his hands. Sash, I don't know what's going on with me next to you, but now it seems to me that the family never existed. That everything is just a dream and a delusion, or maybe it's a dream now. I don't think I could ever be without you, but I don't want to rush into it. Let's just spend this month together. I have some unused vacation time. And then, she said excitedly, afraid to change her mind if she hesitated with an absolutely crazy, spontaneous decision. If you don't change your mind, if it's not a whim and we won't let go of all this, then we'll decide how to go on living. Alexander took her proposal painfully, as if she was giving them both a trial period. His mind told him that Varya was taking sense. At least she was trying to keep her sanity. But his soul whimpered. Unreasonably, he wanted complete, unconditional trust of her part. All of this flashed through his mind in a matter of seconds, and he nodded, agreeing, accepting this course of events. Varya breathed a sigh of relief, telling herself that it was the perfect solution. In a month, he would sort himself out, the crush would pass, and he would be able to live with a clear conscience. And she would try to take from this time everything possible happy and bright to keep in her memory for the rest of her single life. She let herself let go of her feelings, let herself not think, but will promise not to get attached to him, because a relationship with such an age difference is doomed to failure one way or another. Having accepted this version of what was going on, Varya smiled, relaxed, and began to appetizing amazingly tasty kebabs. Sasha watched her with interest for a while, realizing exactly what she was up to, how she decided to deceive herself. After all, he could clearly see Vara's reaction to him. And it wasn't just a physical hunger of a mature woman who had not had sex in a long time. It was good that her ex-husband was no match for him. Vara wasn't the type to forgive betrayal and turn a blind eye to infidelity. She distracted from the meal and looked at him in surprise, embarrassed. "Why aren't you eating? And where did you learn to cook so deliciously?" "Sorry, I was thinking," he apologized. "A friend taught me to cook, the chief of a restaurant." He didn't say anything about the fact that he'd made his friendship by working there as a loader after the university classes. There was no need to bother Vara with the details of his complicated relations with his family. After all, they will soon leave and perhaps never even see these people again. "Come on, I'll show you the house," he called when the dinner was finished. The glasses were empty and the stars began their merry game of winking. Varvara felt awkward and self-conscious. It was nearing nightfall. It was clear that they would not return to the city. The house was not too big. They wouldn't lie down in the same room when they met on just one day. On the other hand, hadn't she promised herself some freedom from the shackles of convention? Sasha unmistakably considered her doubts and fears, but didn't comment on them in any way. Instead, he put his arms around her waist and led her to the porch in a measured stride. "My grandfather built this house. He was a strict man, but fair," he said with warmth in his voice, and he stopped in front of the door. Judging by his wandering smile, his grandfather had hit him hard and more than once, but unmarried. I wondered what he had been like as a child and boy. Calm and fidgety. What was he fond of? What he loved? He ran his hand reverently along the carved wooden posts on which the old awning leaned heavily. He turned to face Varvara. "I've never brought anyone here," he said, almost in a whisper. The woman realized the extent of Alexander's trust and openness. For a moment she thought it was because of his youth, but immediately rejected this thought. With such appearance and charisma, it is unlikely that he led the life of a recluse. I wonder how many of them there were before her, beautiful young girls in love with him. Sasha hummed. By some miracle, he was always very precise about her thoughts, and if he could read them on a news sticker. "Let's go inside. You'll like it." "What about the dishes?" "We'll come back for them later." Vara nodded and followed. The house was even cozier than she had thought when they arrived. Handmade carpets hung on the wall according to old customs. A path of colors twisted on the floor, leading deep into the structure, so unmodern and so lovely. In the corner was an icon, a piece of wood with a simple but soulful image. Darkened by time, it had lost some of its lines, but it had accumulated an emotional power that made anyone who looked at it immediately remember all their sins. Vara frowned. The only sin she found was her intention not to reject Sasha's feelings. She scolded herself, but she didn't want to fight the new sensations, not now. And in a month, he would leave anyway, alone, so she decided, so as not to spoil his life. He'd be offended, but he'd be grateful when he realized it. Sasha followed her gaze and frowned, suspecting something wrong. He gave it to a sudden impulse and led his beloved to the image. "Here, meet my favorite. What do you say, grandfather?" He said a little cockily, clasping her arm tightly. The floorboards in the room creaked. Vara jumped up, frightened. Then she laughed to herself, and he picked up her laughter, hugging her and circling the room. Vara mentally apologized if she had broken any laws. asked the higher powers in which she had not believed before to keep this brave and still pure guy safe. "Varya, don't frown, Varya, everything will be all right now," he said. They were no longer circling the room like madmen, but stood in the very center. The lights had gone out, and Varya didn't care why. The dishes remained unaccustomed on the table untidy, the door unlocked. And all she could do was stare into his fathomless eyes and fly somewhere into the abyss, soar into the heavens. To look and believe every word so convincingly and confidently uttered by this man-boy. "What am I doing?" she wanted to exclaim, but instead she fervently and selflessly responded to his hot and unhurried kiss. "Sasha," she moaned, reaching out with both hands to explore his face, shoulders, and neck as if blinded by his touch. Airy, light touches with just her fingertips. She'd considered herself blind until this day, before him. Given into feelings she hadn't explored, unexplored, she began to cover his face with kisses. He picked her up in his arms and carried her to the room he had prepared for them yesterday. He could easily walk by touch, having studied every detail of this house, having spent his whole life escaping here at the first opportunity. He sat her down by the bed and, without hesitation, kissed her with the eagerness of a traveler who had found a life-giving spring after 5 days of wandering in the desert. He ran his palm along her back, ran his fingers up her spine, as if playing a tune he knew only to himself on the piano, making her shiver and yearn. Gently he laid her down on the cool blanket. Varya shuddered at the contrast of the cold and the heat blazing inside. She did not stop studying his face and body, pulling off his shirt, which had not been buttoned then. She froze with delight and anticipation, feeling the pleasant weight of his body on hers and the desire bubbling within him. For a moment she wondered again what he could find in her. After all, she was older, not beautiful, though attractive, not a cheerful and easygoing coquette, not an outstanding personality, though no mediocre. But in the next second, all her thoughts and doubts dissolved in the burning flames of sensual pleasure. Let the whole world fly into the abyss, if only it did not stop now, Varya thought, finally losing touch with reality. Chapter 6. Varya stared wide-eyed at the patch of starry sky visible through the uncurtained window, gently stroking Sasha's chest, absent-mindedly tracing intricate patterns with her finger. He was breathing deeply and measuredly, sprawled out on the bed, but even in his sleep he held her tightly with one hand. It was as if he was afraid he would change his mind and run away. Varya smiled happily. No way. Now he would show her a way, but she couldn't leave. How did he turn everything in her upside down? Did he cast a spell or something? She stretched her lips again in a lazy, peaceful smile. One could not help but think about such a rapid and drastic change. She bashfully hid her face on his chest, hugging him tighter, suddenly remembering their nightly battles with themselves, fears and worries. Battles for love and joint victories on top of bliss, which the soul could not convey in words. Every time Varya felt as if it was not the union of bodies and the ancient, as the words itself, dance of bodies of two lovers, but the merging of two souls. It was as if they were becoming one. They felt and experienced everything as a single organism. They were not looking at each other, but in the same direction. When on Tuesday the chief refused her vacation not only in the telephone mode, but also in principle, Sasha suddenly and without asking picked up the phone, brazenly asked the chief to hand on the wire and, covering the phone with his hands, asked her, "Do you like your job?" Varya looked at him, mesmerized and smiling madly, shook her head silently. Sasha smiled. "I thought so. Are you here? This is already to the boss. Varvara is quitting." There was silence in the phone. "But she has to work for 2 weeks, and we were a month's paycheck pending." "You can't do that," the manager mumbled confusedly. "You can't," Sasha easily agreed, noticing how the always responsible Varya frowned. "That's why the report card will close your personal officer, and she will close the salary for this month tomorrow and get a settlement. Do I understand what I'm saying, or did I get something mixed up?" Hardly anyone could object to him. So confidently and with pressure he spoke. Varya listened silently and nodded like a Chinese dummy, smiling. He had just robbed her of her job, and she only felt even freer and lighter. In essence, he was just being braver. After all, she didn't like this place herself, but she lacked determination. Sasha, as if always, knew what to do and say. Monday flew by for fishing and swimming in the surprisingly clean river. She was careful not to break the promise she'd made to herself and tried not to think about what would happen next when he or his family pointed out the obvious. They could be together, and then she would obediently drift back to her grey, monotonous life. And now, in contrast to him, even more grey, monotonous, but not at this moment. Right now she would be happy, for and against all odds. Just like that, suddenly and long-awaited. On Wednesday, Alexander drove her into town and made sure the chief's rights weren't violated. Closed payroll slate on his desk along with Varina's resignation letter. Moreover, solemnly laid all his pile of paper with Sasha, not letting go of her palm. Varya only chuckled stupidly behind his back, seeing the confused expression of the always haughty face of the boss, a balding man of solid age who grew a solid pot-belly and a record of deceived secretaries. The next one had just glanced hungrily at Alexander's strong muscles looming under his shirt. She looked at Varvara with a victorious look. They say, such a handsome man, you can't. Varya gave in to the impulse and playfully mocked her face, showing her tongue. Judging by Sasha's smile, he felt it too. He always knew everything about her better than she did. Then they went to the store to buy some clothes and groceries. Sasha forbade her to take anything from her past life. He found a realtor who would rent out her apartment in absentia so that it wouldn't sit idle. Varya thought to be frightened by such pressure, but caught herself thinking that she always wanted it, the opportunity not to make a decision, and relaxed completely. It would be as it was, and the tenants then just asked to vacate the apartment, and she could easily find a new job with her experience and reputation. On Thursday, he went somewhere on business, having left his place after a call from a foreign number. He came back thoughtful, immersed in himself. Varya started cleaning in his absence so as not to be idle. She came across a small closed room, which he had never noticed before. She blushed ashamedly, remembering why she hadn't noticed it before. Wiped the handle and the door itself. I couldn't resist. She went in. The first thing that caught her eye was a huge photograph, almost the entire wall. The almost beautiful and sophisticated girl she had ever seen was looking at her. She was passionately playing the violin, completely immersed in her composition she was playing. Her eyes were deep and thoughtful, and contrasted sharply with the youngfulness of her whole appearance. Varya sank down on a stool, so fortunately standing nearby. She looked around the room, stumbling everywhere on the photo of this beauty. This is the end of the fairy tale, Varya thought heavily, preparing to say goodbye to Alexander. Everything is right. Such and should be next to him. Beautifully airy fairy tale, young. Wiping away an unsolicited tear, Varya got up and left the room, quietly closing the door behind her, as if she was afraid to disturb someone's sleep. She turned around and ran into the prickly gaze of the eyes that had so quickly become dear to her. Sasha stood opposite, crossing his arms over his chest, and, it seems, was not happy with what he saw. "I'm sorry, please," Varya whispered guiltily, excusing herself like a schoolgirl for a cheat sheet she had found. Sasha immediately softened, held out his hand to her and led her back into the room. "I am angry not because you saw her," he explained, hugging the young woman affectionately from behind, "but because you're thinking God knows what again. Meet Varya, this is my mother." There was silence in the room. "She?" The question hung in the air unspoken. "Yes, she is no longer there," simply answered Sasha. "Long gone. Don't be sad. I've already suffered this fact," mourned and let her go. Varya turned her head to him, looking at him as if for the first time, how much he had been through and how strong he was. She jumped up, realizing that she was losing her head more and more and dissolving into him, admiring him. "Is she a violinist?" Varvara asked quietly, not daring to speak of her in the past tense. "She was an incredible violinist," the man answered warmly, plunging into those fragments of memories where he and his mother were together, where they understood each other from half a word. After all, it was his mother who had taught him empathy, for her example. Now it's helped him not to miss his happiness. Sasha pressed Varvara tighter to him, stood like that for a while, enjoying the peace and slightly strange company of two favorite people. Varya realized that he was not ready to tell her more. She did not insist. Someday it would be time to find out other details. Yes, she didn't want to let him go or leave him. After all, they both want to be together. Why, for what, or for whom should they fight themselves? The future was not something she wanted to think about. She'd already lived too long cautiously, as if with an eye of the rules that every man she met dictated to her, believing decency to be a weakness and taking advantage of it. "Sasha," she called softly, awkwardly turning to face him in the tight ring of her favorite hands. He leaned toward her, watching her efforts with a smile of amusement and not even trying to help. Let her know she couldn't get away from him. "Don't laugh," Varya said bashfully, burying her face into his shirt, inhaling with pleasure the familiar perfume that reflected the owner's character. I think, Sasha, Alexander tensed hardly noticeably, lost in conjecture. "I fell in love with you." Embarrassed, she confessed, and he immediately sighed, relaxed. "Just that?" The man chuckled, teasing her. "I've never experienced anything like this before," Varya continued. "With you, I'm alive. I don't know if I'm real, but She looked trustingly into his eyes. Sasha put his finger in her lips, calling for silence. "Feeling loves silence," he wisely reminded her, and leaned down to kiss her favorite face. Pulling away after a while and unobtrusively leading her out of the room, he lingered for a moment before closing the door. It was as if he was asking his mother's blessing. "Varya, I called my folks. I told them I was in town." She looked at her lover in surprise. "Did he tell them only now? Why?" "Don't ask," Sasha waved away. "You cannot not tell. They will find out themselves offended, and I promised my mom to stay out of the way. Anyway, next week they are expecting us for a family dinner." He looked at her expectantly and kind of scared. "We don't have to go," he added. "Why?" Varya tilted her head to the side curiously. "Sash, tell me what's wrong." "I can't. I'm sorry, Varya. I can't yet." He shut himself off, stepped back to the window, staring at the familiar landscape with a prickly gaze. Vara approached him, stroked him affectionately on the back. "I'll do as you want. If you tell me to go, let's go. If you tell me not to go, let's not go. I wanted to say I loved him. It turned out to be a surprisingly nice thing to say, but Sasha cut it off again. "Silence," said sharply and smoothed the words with a new portion of tenderness and kisses. Vara got worried. What if his relatives didn't like her? Why was he so sensitive about everything related to them? What if she didn't pass the family interview for the role of his life partner? "Vara," Alexander laughed. "It is not good for you to think at all. Everything will be fine. I'm with you," said and hugged her, as if protecting her from the whole world. And Vara relaxed again in the cocoon of his care and attention. Chapter 7. Family dinner crept up elusively fast. Vara frightened a little, put on light makeup appropriate for the occasion, and sank exhaustedly into the chair. Over the past few days, she had exhausted herself with doubts, fears, and numerous complexes. "Vara," Alexander shook his head, "what have you puzzled yourself again?" "Sasha, I was thinking, why now? Can't we postpone this meeting a little longer?" "Chickened out?" chuckled the young man without malice. Then he became serious and squatted down in front of her. "Vara, I'm sorry, but we have to leave early. I won't rush you," he added hastily. "When were you going to tell me?" Vara asked, lost in thoughts, turning dark. "Closer to the date of departure," the man answered honestly. "I didn't want to upset you before the time." "Is it possible to be later?" Vara snorted resentfully. "The truth is always better. It saves time." The chill in her voice was instantaneous. It was as if this news has built a wall between them, pushing them back to weeks when a future together had seemed impossible to her. "Vara, I ordered tickets for both of us." He rummaged in the back pocket of his jeans and pulled out 2 tickets. "Here is mine." He held out his airplane ticket to his beloved. "And here is one in your name in exactly 1 week. It's for the best. I'll have time to prepare everything for your arrival." But that didn't make Vara feel any better. There was a heavy premonition of a soon parting. "And how will I live without you this week?" she asked languidly, taking the tickets from his hands and making sure of the truth of what he said. Sasha laughed cheerfully. "And you said—" "No way!" Varvara waved away with a smile, offering her cheek for a kiss. But she noticed that Sasha smiled this time only with his lips. "Was it because of that phone call? Is it safe for you?" Vara asked him bluntly. He did not deny it, but he didn't tell her the details either. "Let's go, or we risk being late, and that's probably not too good. Don't worry about anything. Everything's gonna be fine." And she believed again. But her heart scratched as she got into the car, looking longingly at the cozy house. She wanted to believe that her lover knew what he was doing this time too. Chapter 8. "Here we are," Sasha stated with contrived cheerfulness, parking in front of the elite housing complex. He was visibly nervous, and this state was transmitted to Varvara, increasing her own anxiety. She knew this house well and hoped with all her heart not to meet anyone who could mar the acquaintance with her relatives. Vara smiled affectionately at her lover, gently squeezed his hand, and go out of the car without waiting for his help. Sasha repeatedly asked her not to do that again. But it always seemed to her that such attention was a relic of the past, which would quickly tire them both, as a kind of tribute of times long past. The man led her to the entrance with video surveillance. The concierge clarified the purpose of the visit and, satisfied with the answer, let them in. Stepping onto the always perfectly clean and freshly peeled green carpet, Varya took a deep breath, trying to calm down. However, anxiety grew as the elevator took them to the topmost floor. She knew that the owners of this apartment has a huge landscape terrace, but there was more than one apartment. Her chest constricted and she felt as if she were about to suffocate when Alexander went to the door and pressed the button. The bell rang, reminiscent of the song of birds. Varya shuddered. The apartment could have been sold. Was it worth getting so worked up beforehand? Furtively wiping her palms, soaked with excitement, Varvara swallowed a heavy lump and looked at Sasha. He looked absolutely unperturbed, as if he hadn't been worried 5 minutes ago. The door swung open and her nightmare appeared before her. "Well, hello, brother," the man hummed, not too cordially, and turned his gaze to his companion. Rostislav's eyebrows rose upward in surprise at the perfectly styled bangs. Varya shrank into a lump, but he remained silent. She suspected the silence would not last long. The man shook hands discreetly, making a semblance of an embrace. Then the landlord stepped aside to let them inside. Closing the door behind them, he looked at Varvara with a scrutinizing gaze familiar to her. Sasha escorted his beloved into the luxurious hall, furnished, deliberately pretentious. Everything here seems to squeeze out casual visitors who did not correspond to the status. The girl deliberately clung to Alexander's hand, fearing the inevitable. Another man entered the room and she noticed the way Sasha looked up. It was as if he was preparing for battle. He squeezed her palm encouragingly. After him came a tall blonde who continued to enthusiastically tell her father-in-law about something that seemed important to her, but only amused the head of the family. "Andrei Yegorovich, but am I right? Don't you agree?" The girl, with the appearance of a model and pumped lips and breasts, pouted resentfully. But then her gaze fell on Varvara. Her eyes immediately squinted angrily. "This is a disaster," panicked the guest. "Sasha, I need to," she began, but realized that she was hopelessly late with explanations. Who could have known that fate would give her such a cruel joke and, of all men, will give her love to Rostislav's brother? "Hello," Sasha greeted politely but dryly. He endured the man's hard look, the evil squint of his sister-in-law, and the cynical smirk of his brother. Alas, such a meeting is usual for him, but it may shock Varya. He needs to be strong to by no means let them hurt his beloved. "What is she doing here?" the blonde shrieked, poking Varya with a carefully polished fingernail. Elvira frowned angrily and folded her hands on her impressive-sized breasts, frankly indignant. The man seemed amused by the situation. "Do you know each other?" Sasha was confused for a moment but quickly pulled himself together. "You bet," snorted the girl mockingly. "What, she decided to get into a decent family through another bunk?" "Shut her up," the man gritted his teeth, turning to his brother. He turned to Varya, trying to look and behave as gently as possible. "Varya?" The only thing visible on her frightened face seemed to be her wide-open, tear-filled eyes. And she looked so guilty that his heart shuddered and plummeted somewhere downward. "What the hell is going on?" Varya sobbed, pitifully unable to restrain herself. What a fool she was. She should have told him everything, but she didn't know. "Sasha," she couldn't utter another word. The notorious lump in her throat prevented her from speaking. Through the veil of tears, she was the gloating expression of Elvira's face. She could even understand her feelings, even though she didn't like the lady. "It seems that Varya has speech problems again," Rostik said cynically. Elvira giggled disgustedly, taking her husband under her arm, but keeping her greedy gaze on Alexander. "Maybe she just has a brain problem," she added cheerfully. The father-in-law grinned. He sat down on a chair in front of the table set for the guests, as if he were preparing to watch a play. "Your beloved is just the whore, a cheap pussy," Elvira said, gradually escalating tones. "Did you know she was sleeping with your brother?" The venomous remark made Varya shudder as if from a blow and pull her hand out of Sasha's palm. The worst thing was not even the caustic words, but the look of confusion of her lover's face and how easily her hand slipped out. "I didn't," Varya whispered. She burst into tears, hiding her face in her hands, and ran away, realizing that she couldn't say anything else. And most importantly, no one would listen to her now. It's over. The most ignominious relationship ending imaginable. Having escaped from the suffocating atmosphere of ostentatious luxury, Varvara, hardly recognizing the road, rushed to the bus stop. Smearing mascara all over her face, tried together with tears to wipe away the pain from her face, mercilessly choking her. Why? Why had she never learned to defend herself? Why does she always keep silent when she is attacked? Why can others so skillfully twist any fact? And why did Sasha stay there instead of leaving with her to listen? Varya even turned around, checking to see if he was following. Stupid. After all, she knew from the beginning that nothing would come out of their love. She sighed convulsively, trying to calm down. Maybe it was for the best that it was like this and that now. It would have been even more painful later, wouldn't it? The woman looked at the road. It was as if she had woken up from a sweet dream. She didn't want to take public transportation. It was necessary to walk, to refresh her thoughts. The illusion of action always helped bring her to her senses, and her house was only a few stops away. She turned around once more, making sure Sasha hadn't caught up with her. She smiled bitterly and wandered home, back home. Chapter 9. Alexander, who was naturally perceptive and sensitive to people, clenched his jaws tightly as he stared at Varvara. He could catch up with her now, listen to her and comfort her. He had never doubted her innocence for a second. Knowing the character of his beloved and having perfectly studied the god of his snake's haven, they must have been stockpiling poison for his arrival. But we cannot leave. First, it would be seen as an escape, a weakness. Second, he must protect the honor of his beloved. He turned slowly toward his relatives. Elvira was silenced by his thunderbolt stare. "Oh," the father stretched out contentedly. "There's our wolf cub back. Don't bother glaring at me from under my forehead." He walked calmly to the open door leading to the terrace and smoked, letting out rings of smoke with pleasure. "So this girl is your favorite? By what right do you behave like this?" Sasha almost spat out, addressing the blonde and his brother, but keeping a wary eye on his father. At such moments, he was especially glad that after the 5th year of music school, he found the strength to break his mother's word and run out the back door to boxing classes. At one time, he had to participate in fights without rules, but now he could be sure that no one would dare to touch him. But he still hadn't learned to defend his soul as skillfully, and he was still vulnerable to those who wanted to hurt him. "Keep your voice down," Rostik muttered, but without much enthusiasm. Having married the cover, he soon regretted it. But to get rid of the burdock, deliberately clung to his wallet, could not without damaging the family capital. So he was forced to outwardly support his wife. In an attempt to console himself, his brother occasionally had a simple affair. "Is it really true, Varya? I see on your face glimmers of realization," quietly concluded Rostislav. "I'm glad you realized." Elvira, swaying her hips, sailed past the lost Sasha to the bar. "If you want, we can share it with each other," mockingly whispered his brother, hoping that Ella didn't hear him. Sasha clenched his fist in impotent anger. "Share your litter with whoever you want, but don't you dare touch my woman," he said firmly. His brother recoiled, his face turning serious, his features hard and unattractive. He would be glad to share his wife with others if only she would leave him alone. But Sasha had never before shown such firmness in front of the elders in the family. Yes, he didn't let them oppress him when he got older, but he didn't fight back. "You think you can afford that kind of behavior? You think you ran away and became independent? Sucker!" Father thumped his palm on the window sill. A tiny crack snagged across the window. "By the way, I caught them in our bed." Elvira sipped her cocktail and sneered. "I had to buy a new bed." She wrinkled her nose squeamishly. "The whole place was fumigated by the commoner." "Remember what dump Rostislav found you in and keep your mouth shut." "At your discretion." Sasha couldn't stand it. Sasha shouted, not even turning to face her. Ella turned red with anger, but noticing the mood of her father-in-law, kept silent. Storm clouds were coming, and to make him angry was not for her to do. If everything succeeded, he could easily change Rostik till undesired and always unavailable to her Sasha. Then she would get even. However, the next moment the girl opened her mouth wide in surprise when she heard the words of the head of the family. "Your departure doesn't change anything. Your boxing lessons, by the way, don't change anything either." He squinted his eyes as he watched his son's face change. "Did you really think anything would remain a secret to me? That's funny. You marry Christina and that's the end of it. Otherwise, you'll lose your inheritance and—" "I refuse it," Sasha answered firmly and clearly, almost for the first time in his life, allowing himself to interrupt the domestic tyrant. "Are you hoping for your business?" Father chuckled, but concern crept into his eyes. "Or do you want to sue for your share? You think you've become a very competent lawyer? My pack of specialists." "I've never claimed that money." Sasha sat down on the chair, once again demonstrating his independence and disregard for the shabby rules. "Especially since we both know it's my mother's money. Without her, you would never have built your empire, would you?" "How dare you?" "I dare you." Now Sasha banged his fist on the table so that the instrument jumped, jingling fearfully at the same time as Elvira. "Your violinist didn't know a damn thing about real business." The father pulled out his cigar, almost crushing it in the ashtray, and glared menacingly at his unruly offspring. "Her concert fees were your startup money. They were your entire capital until you went rogue." The atmosphere was heating up, but no one in the room wanted to leave the battlefield. "I know how my mom died," Sasha said in the low voice. Judging by the way the jaws of his father's face set in, the bluff had hit the mark. Alexander didn't know for sure, had no proof, but he felt, understood, analyzed, and if he hit the target correctly, he would certainly get to the truth in the given direction. After all, it was his financial documentation got him friends and Rorit Varya in search of fraud. Even if he does not find evidence for this man's guilt in the death of his mother, he will put him in jail under another article. "You are lying," the father objected not too confidently, gently probing the ground. As an experienced businessman, he couldn't believe that he had missed somewhere and was vulnerable. Father, what is he talking about? I'm saying I know exactly what your father's involvement was in my mother's death. He's as much mine as he's yours, Rostislav snorted, habitually bickering with his younger brother. And here you are wrong, Sasha smiled contentedly, watching the collapse of the Snake Kingdom. And here he had irrefutable proof. The man leisurely opened a briefcase with the papers and placed the document on the table. This is, of course, a copy. The original is waiting for me in a safe place. And in the event of my sudden, he chuckled, demise, it will be made public, causing a stir, ruining the family's reputation and burying the company's reputation forever. Besides, I took my mother's name. The whole business was in her name. It's going to be passed on to me. And according to my will, to Varvara if anything goes wrong. It's a DNA test. But you and I don't need one, Father, he emphasized the last word. You and I both know what happened to my real father, letting you marry Mom and adopt me. That's clever, his brother whistled with frank admiration. What do you want? Father clarified. All right, we're bargaining, so he's bitten. The rest is a matter of a technique. Freedom. I want my freedom from your entire family. You sign a necessary papers guaranteeing my safety and the safety of those closest to me. And I won't take away your mother's capital, without which your empire will collapse like a house of cards. There was a tense silence in the room. Finally, the head of the family grinned thoughtfully. The earth is round, son, and I have so many friends. No document can guarantee you that one of them will not like your office, your wife, your car, or your house. Christina and the Major, on the other hand, then will take her father off the chessboard together and the whole empire will belong to just two of us. Tempting, isn't it? Father, Rostislav interjected in a bewildered manner, not seeing what place he had in this plan. Elvira incomprehensibly shifted her gaze from one man to another. It seems that it smells fried. You don't need an excavator, Sasha hummed cheerfully, turning a smartphone in his hand. Only you can dig your own hole so skillfully. The man visibly tensed up. This tape just flew into Christina's father's mailbox. I think he'll want to play this game of chess with you too, and my terms remain the same. Sasha rose leisurely from his seat and headed for the exit. Already at the threshold, he turned around. I promised my mother not to break the established way of life, and I have never broken her promise before. She believed until her last day that this shit was the real family. But you can't make compote out of rotten apples, he smiled sadly. Have a nice day. Chapter 10. As soon as the door closed behind Alexander, Andrei Yegorovich reached for the phone. Dad, what does all this mean? Not fully realizing what was happening, Rostislav clarified. Am I even your own son? Tried to disguise his own confusion with a joke, but it was not too successful. Don't talk nonsense, Elvira sluggishly objected, seeing the belligerent mood of your father-in-law. Her husband frowned unhappily but did not argue. Instead, consciously reached for the document left on the table for review. Today, Sasha was completely different. Unruly, strong, self-confident. I wanted to call him a brother. But by the strange laws of the universe, today it turned out that they were nothing to each other. The irony of fate, no other way. Rostik smiled sadly, staring stupidly at the wording with a 99.9% probability of no family connection. His father had spent his whole life trying to break Sashka, to pull him under himself, and he didn't seem to argue, but he didn't submit either. But the man got used to such an environment, began to unconsciously imitate his father, and also reveted his younger brother, while feeling a vague chill to his mother. It turns out that everything is simply unexplainable. They are all strangers to each other. He and his father are separate. Sashka and his mother are separate. Rostik felt himself a scoundrel. And after all, his fragile and gentle woman never once reproached him in coldness, did not make it clear that he is not her son. He clutched his head, bending it to his knees. A sharp pang of shame consumed him. "Don't get a Shakespearean on me," his father said squeamishly. He called someone, but there was no answer. While waiting for the return call, the man finally noticed his son's distress. "Why didn't you tell me?" Rostislav raised his head and Elvira saw tears in his eyes. "Why?" Andrei shrugged his shoulders. "If you gladly poisoned their own, they steal with a wormhole, so would have accepted strangers." But he was right, the son realized with horror. The young man rose from his seat and, without noticing anything around him, wandered in the direction of the bar. "Don't you dare get drunk," growled the father, helplessly contemplating the collapse of his family. "We have an important meeting tomorrow." His thoughts were already whirling feverishly in search of a favorable solution. He would tell Christina's father that the audio was a fabrication to upset their plans. Rostislav could marry Christina, and Elvira, she could be shut up with a bribe or out of the way, or... He cast an appraising glance over the chiseled figure. He's not old himself. He'd put her under him to keep her quiet. He could always get her out of the way. The girl read the impending danger in his glance and immediately hurried away. "I'll keep an eye on Rostik," she muttered incoherently and flew out of the room. She caught up with her husband on the landing. She was leisurely descending the stairs, now and then stopping to sip expensive cognac from his throat. Ella sympathetically hummed. Estimate the distance between them, hurriedly pulled off her high-heeled shoes, afraid of breaking her neck in such shoes. She caught up with her husband and stopped in front of him, blocking the way. Rostik looked down at her in surprise. "What? You're not really my wife too?" grinned the man. "Stop fooling around," Elvira hissed angrily, taking the bottle from him and glancing warily at the apartment. "We need to have a serious talk." Rostislav hiccuped in surprise and was about to sit down on the steps, but realized that the place was not too suitable for the conversation and went into the pockets of his pants in search of car keys. "No, I'll drive myself. We don't want to get killed by your stupidity. Better yet, let's go." She winked conspiratorially at her husband and confidently dragged him along. Rostislav obediently followed, noting with surprise the changes in his wife. Strange, but without those murderous heels, she did not seem so easily accessible. And her gait is quite feminine, not vulgar. I don't think he should drink anymore, or he might discover that he loves her. He grinned and headed for the exit, listening to Ella call a cab to their address in the near whisper. Chapter 11. Elvira dutifully pulled her headphones out of her reticule, plugged them into the socket of her iPhone. One of the diamonds on the back of her device scratched her palm painfully. Ella smiled with almost masochistic pleasure. She knew one of the stones was sharp and had deliberately not given it to the master as a reminder of the dangers of luxury. She confidently put one earpiece in her ear, the other in the ear of her dazed husband, who kept his interested eyes on her. "Dance," she commanded softly, losing the capricious intonation he was accustomed to. He raised his eyebrows, but for some reason he could not disobey. Obediently imitating listening to pop music, he moved in a rhythm incomprehensible even to himself, listening with horror to his father's words. "When I call, you should answer at once. I never call for nothing. Have you forgotten who put you in this seat?" "You what?" The question was stuck unspoken. Rostik looked admiringly at his wife, who quite obviously had installed a wiretap in their house. So that's how she was calculating his mistresses. Elvira put her finger to her lips and began to wriggle in front of him, as if trying to seduce him with a dance. He was watching her actions, mesmerized, when a cab pulled up. The driver pushed his glasses down on his nose, whistling at what he saw. For the first time in his life, Rostik felt like punching someone in the face for staring at his wife. Having loaded her husband into the back seat, Ella sat down next to him, taking a sip of cognac for convincing. She wrinkled her nose. She started kissing. Rostik stunned, watching what was happening as if from the outside. In her eyes there was not a drop of passion, intoxication of the familiar coquetry which usually made him sick. The girl was concentrating on listening to something that made his blood run cold. The kids forfeit if he doesn't understand the first warning. No, there was no need for ceremony. Quietly and quietly. Don't touch the girl yet. I'll check the will. A young wife is not the worst option. I've already looked for a lover to accompany her, Andrei grinned. He said something else, but Elvira took out her headphones and hid them in her reticule. She gave the driver an unfamiliar address. Rostik drove in silence. Ella, on the contrary, chattered away. The driver stared with hungry eyes at the deep neckline of her dress, rather revealing than hiding her attractive body. They got out of the car in front of a simple house. Elvira immediately waved goodbye to the cab driver, showing a crumpled banknote, and slipped into the entrance. Rostislav followed. "Where are we?" asked the man, not understanding why they are not going anywhere, and stand at the door as glued. "Wait," the girl hissed, staring at the keyhole, so that Rostislav stared at her perfectly shaped buttocks and long legs, feeling the desire growing in him. "Don't look like that," she snorted, not turning around. "You're not going to get it anyway. Come on, let's go." She pulled him by the arm and led him to the bus stop, as if she knew the neighborhood well. "Ella, what is this spy passion?" Rostik was indignant, but received such an angry look in return that he immediately shut up. They traveled a few stops on the bus. He looked at the passengers with the curiosity of a researcher to his subjects. The smell of stale bodies, tired, disengaged faces made it hard for him to enjoy the ride. He even thought he'd had too much to drink, and now he was sick and dreaming of some zombie apocalypse. When they peeled out of the crowded bus, the man was finally able to breathe fully. He realized that it was still better not to ask questions, and walked intriguedly along with Elvira, who was concentratingly silent. They stopped in front of an old but well-maintained 5-story building. Ella put the magnet key to the intercom and entered. "Are you coming?" she asked in surprise, turning around. Rostik nodded and hurriedly entered after her. The steps, a door, clearly an apartment she knew well. Only here did she allow herself to relax. She threw off her shoes, pulled down her tight dress, and pushed a bra over her head. Rostik felt a new wave of lust. He jogged toward her, treating her action as an invitation to sex, but she closed the bedroom door right in front of his nose. Leaning against it, she exhaled in relief. Just a little longer and it would be over. Sitting down in front of the dresser, she grimaced painfully, removing her false lips. How could anyone willingly disfigure themselves like this, Ella thought. She shook out her hair, enjoying the sensation of freeing the roots from the rigid styling. She pulled a pair of worn jeans and a t-shirt a size larger from the old dresser. I glanced in the mirror and smiled contentedly. Yes, not a sultry beauty, but all her own and real. It's a pity that the vacation will not last long. I went out to my husband, anticipating his reaction. Rostik looked dumbfounded at the pretty girl in simple clothes standing in front of him. Ella, he asked in surprise and took a step back. He felt tired and lost. Too many metamorphoses in one day. He was afraid that his psyche would simply not hold up. And this was the girl he had once fallen in love with. Charming and modest, cheerful and light, real. Hungry for sincerity, he drank her like nectar and could not get enough. When had her transformation into the bitch, he hardly recognized her but called his vice begun. Sit down, Ella nodded and smiled understandingly. I'll make us some coffee. You need a clear brain. Rostik nodded. He looked around, found several high bar stools by the counter and headed for one of them. I understand that you are confused now, said his wife, deftly operating in someone else's kitchen. I will try to clarify the situation for you. But please, let's not get emotional and offended. I also have something to say to you, but I am silent. The man nodded incredulously, taking it into consideration. You heard what your father is going to do to Sasha. He won't, Rostik said uncertainly. He'll just scare him. Elvira raised one eyebrow and looked at her husband mockingly. You're not so naive, are you? Rostik, your father is a monster, and I had the perfect plan to avenge him for my mother. What do you mean? The man clearly realized that this day will definitely end for him a big drunk, because his whole life threatened to be a fiction, where everyone knows the truth and he alone lives in ignorance. It must have been great to see everyone laughing at him. At this turn of events, I want your support, Ella said bluntly, pouring coffee into cups and sitting down across from me. I wanted to act alone, but it's better this way. Your father killed my mom when she refused to sleep with him. He's used to taking everything without asking, and now he's being rebuffed. The bastard, she said angrily, staring blankly into her cup. I came home from uni and my mom, well, the only thing she could tell me before she died to all my questions was your father's name and surname. Yeah, and I saw him leaving our house, happy. The doctor said she was raped before she died. There was silence. Rostik swallowed saliva, still refusing to believe what he heard. But subconsciousness stubbornly said that everything was so. She had no reason to lie. And he himself realized somewhere in the depths of his soul that his father was capable of many things. Sasha told you the truth. He's the one who brought his mother's down. His entire capital, though, was based on his wife's investments. A promising, successful, unique violinist. She was left alone with the baby in her arms. Her husband was in the military and died. A year later, she married your father. I don't know where your mom disappeared to. I'm sorry. But a young widower with a kid a year older than her son got married. And then she started screwing his wife when she refused to sign everything over him, having figured out his plans and caring about her son's future. Sasha doesn't have proof. I have it, and I'm giving it to Sasha. Why would you do that? Rostik said in a shocked, hoarse voice. First, I love Sasha, she glared at her husband defiantly. Secondly, he will help me to punish the murderer of my mother. Maybe then I will stop having these nightmares. The girl lowered her head, sinking into her worries, but quickly pulled herself together. And thirdly, she grinned, I understand what fate in all this prepared for me, Andrei Yegorovich. What do you mean? The mistress he was talking about is me. Don't you understand? You're sleeping with my father? Rostislav exclaimed angrily. Elvira laughed, ringing and light. Are you crazy? Of course not. But he offered me a fatter catch, and more than once. After all, he thought that I fell for you because of money. And that's not true? Rostik froze, waiting for an answer. For some reason, it seems to him now archival. Ella sulked, looked guiltily into his eyes. I liked you, but we didn't meet by chance. I was looking for your father and a way to get close to him to prove his guilt. Because no one at the police department believed me. Nobody believed me at all. Or they did, but they were afraid to go against me. And then your brother showed up and I realized that Rostik went down. Don't. I get it. And why, in fact, why are you sad if you did not burn with love for me? Elvira suddenly flared up. Did you expect me to run after you endlessly as a devoted dog? Ella, that's it. This topic is closed, at least for now. She softened, seeing his remorseful look. The main thing now is to get more evidence and find a way to give it to Sasha. This apartment is mine alone in my real name. I bought the phone myself. It's untraceable. I don't think that picked yours up once, and mine has so much bling on it that even after the confiscation of property, we'll have something to live on. Rostik looked at his wife in disbelief. I won't go against my father, he said, lost in thoughts. Her pronunciation of we, of course, reassured the man. But to betray a parent, no matter what kind of parent he was, it was too unbelievable. Besides, they could all be wrong in their conclusions or even slander him for some ulterior motive of their own. He's a monster, don't you get it? He'll kill us all without even noticing. He won't even bat an eye at such an order. I think you are exaggerating, said her husband uncertainly. Elvira exhaustedly dropped her head on her hands. The arguments were over, and her husband remained an impenetrable cretin devoted to a real monster. Had she been so wrong about him? Ross, when I met you, she lifted her head and sent him a look of promise. You were such a bright and kind guy. You even made jokes about your brother differently without malice. And Sashka, he always tried to support you no matter what. I realized I'll never be with him. He won't forgive or understand me. And he obviously loves Varya and will fight for her. But you and I, we can try to start over when we are safe and victorious. Rostislav felt like a hunted rabbit. He didn't understand everything and didn't want to hear anymore. He wanted so badly that his monster, now he knew that only Sasha's mother read him a bedtime story, tucked up the blanket and kisses his forehead, smiling warmly. He had already made up his mind, looking into Elvira's eyes and seeing in them his salvation and comfort, but he could not yet confess it to himself. Elvira walked smoothly towards him, stood on her toes, and reached up to kiss the man she had once loved. Don't do this to us. Give us a chance, she whispered against his lips. Rostik groaned from the sweet torture, hugged her tightly, eagerly responding to the kiss that promised an unforgettable continuation. Chapter 12. You're a bitch, precious bride. Andrei Yegorovich stretched out contentedly, disconnected from the wiretap on his eldest son's phone. Strangely enough, he sincerely considered the younger one his son. Moreover, to a greater extent than Rostislav, too soft and malleable. The head of the family liked Alexander's perseverance and determination. He even set him as an example to his eldest in private dialogues behind a closed door. Twirling the phone in his hands, he dialed the same number. What else? Irritatedly barked on the other side of the connection. Andrei Yegorovich studiously ignored the obviously spoiled attitude to him. It's nothing. Let him clean up his tails, and then he will deal with the rebel. "There's been a change of plan," he said dryly. "There is something I didn't take into account. There is a silver lining." The man chuckled. Varvara struggled to get home and almost groaned with disappointment as she climbed the last few steps. Veniamin stood in front of her apartment door. The man's wide-open smile, visible behind the bouquet of scarlet roses, faded as soon as he saw his ex-wife. Varenka, what happened to you? Did someone hurt you?" He rushed to her, picking her up under his arm. Varvara, who had already calmed down, felt the new wave of despair choking her, threatening to drown her in heartache. "Venya, handing a doll on his arm," the girl sobbed. What could she explain to him, and why? No, she would not gloat, of course, but he would hardly support her either. Support had always been her before, until she met Sasha. Varya sobbed with renewed vigor, unable to stop. Alexander never called, probably listened to their side of the story, believed it. Relatives, after all, who could be closer? That's right. She should forget him. She doesn't belong to him. He is older than him, and now it turns out his family is rich. And how can they live together if her brother is a constant reminder? What a wife, older and one for two, albeit in the past. Varya bumped her nose into her ex-husband's light-colored shirt. With one hand, Veniamin held Varya, shaking in sobs, with the other, the bouquet lowered down. He was terribly worried, preparing to propose her again, and here is still such a state of her, it seems, passing into outright hysteria. Varya caught the sound of footsteps on the stairs by the edge of her consciousness and instinctively pulled herself up. The gate seemed painfully familiar. I imagined it, perhaps. I pulled away from the man and looked into his eyes, as if she had just seen in his hands a gorgeous bouquet of roses she hated. She couldn't remember that she liked asters, not roses. "And why did you come?" Varvara asked in surprise, taking out the keys and turning them in the keyhole. Now she would send this grief-stricken suitor away, and she could fully immerse herself in her misery. She knew from experience that it was better not to try to be strong by prolonging an agony, but to plunge into it wholeheartedly once. To reach the bottom, to push off and swim out of the ocean of pain, leaving it behind forever. "Varush, it's our wedding anniversary today," Venya mumbled and handed her the bouquet. "We're divorced," Varvara hummed through her tears. "And you marry me again." Venya blotted out, fussily pulling out a red velvet box with a ring from his pocket and almost dropping it. Varya looked at the man in surprise. She turned around at the rustle behind her. For a second, she gasped with happiness when she saw Sasha. Ruffled, he stared at her uninterrupted, his gaze devouring her, getting under her skin and running through her veins with scorching tenderness to her very heart. Both men waited for her response. Time seemed to stand still. Each of them was afraid to move or say anything. Varya greedily absorbed her favorite image, memorized the smallest details of his appearance. So beautiful, so desirable and dear. "I agree," she said, turning to face Veniamin as if Sasha were not even there. "Varya," the sound of his voice echoed painfully in her chest. "What are you doing? What are you doing to yourself again?" But he didn't finish, because in the next second, having made an effort, Varya hugged Veniamin and kissed him. Finding the doorknob with her hand, she opened the door and pushed the distraught man in. She closed the door, immediately pulling away from him, and moaned loudly. It wasn't hard. It was only necessary to revive in her memory the hot nights with Alexander, which revealed in her passionate woman. Venya looked at his ex-wife in surprise. and she fell against the door with her whole body as if she could embrace her beloved. She heard, felt, knew that he was still there, waiting for her. But it would be better for everyone. She wouldn't explain anything, wouldn't make his life a nightmare and deprive him of his brother's company for her sake. The people closest to her are the most precious thing that life gives, and no one has the right to take that away, as fate had taken it away from her. Chapter 13. Sasha leaned his forehead tightly against the door on the other side, facing the impenetrable wall of her stubbornness. He knew that she was close to him now. He felt her with all his heart, with every cell of his body. He thought to bring her out to talk, to force her to give herself away. After all, he didn't believe his relatives, and she should know about it. So he kept silent. Maybe it's for the best. Now the father will start to act. Sasha wouldn't want Varvara to get hurt. No, he must first deal with the past that haunted him, and only then take up with renewed vigor to create a bright future. With her, of course. But what if he is too late? What if she takes his silence for consent and actually remarries her ex-husband? No, that's impossible. If she really loves him, Alexander, she simply cannot do that. Perhaps fate had sent them such a lousy test for a reason. Everyone had a chance to get out their dirty laundry and skeletons in the closet. The man turned his back to the door and slid down it, sitting down on the floor and stretching his legs out in front of him. He himself wouldn't have been able to tell what he was waiting for. Slipping his hands into his pockets, he fumbled for the tickets. Right, he wouldn't settle the matter just like that. He cheered up and ran to the car to get a pen. Varya heard his hurried departing footsteps and sank down. She leaned her back against the door, sliding to the floor just as her lover had gone a minute ago. Venya leaned over to give her a hand, but she rejected the help. She put her palm in front of her, creating a distance, and burst into tears. Restricted in action, Veniamin sat down next to her. He could not leave because Varya was sitting by the door. How to help her, he didn't know. Who is this guy? Muffled former future husband. Varya looked at him with her eyes swollen and refunded from tears. She hummed bitterly. Exactly, boy. And she, a grown woman who played in love and almost ruined a young man's life. There was a strange commotion outside the door, which saved her from having to answer the provocative question. She listened warily. The rustling was repeated. When the most native voice in the world familiarly expressed displeasure, Varya smiled involuntarily. Her skin, tightened by sweat of makeup, stretched unpleasantly. Varya, I know you're here. That you won't open the door for me, and that you love me, it doesn't go away in a day, and if it's as painful as this one. Varvara stood up, turning to face the door. His voice sounded level with her, and she remained on her knees, listening, holding herself back from answering. You should know that I don't believe them. I love you, and you don't know everything. Or rather, you don't know anything about my family. Please, Varya, I'm begging you, don't do anything stupid. Our marriage is not stupidity, Venya snorted angrily, unable to resist making a whispered comment. I'm going to leave now, and you will open the door, Sasha continued, sure that she could hear him, and take what I left here. You have to believe in me. You have to believe in us, Varya. He placed his palm against the soft upholstery to the old front door, exactly where her palm lay on the back of it. Varya nodded as if he could see her. Alexander smiled tiredly. Well done, he said contentedly. Veniamin rounded his eyes in surprise, watching the two of them from the side. Only a blind man would not have noticed how strong and mutual their feelings were. He wrinkled his nose, fully feeling that he was clearly superfluous in his geometric figure. What on earth had happened at their place today? He watched interestedly at Varvara put her ear to the door, holding her breath, listening to the man's footsteps on the landing. Cat scrambled unpleasantly on his soul. She'd never been like this with him, and, what's to say, he had never felt anything like that either, and not only to the former spouse, but in principle. Maybe there is something wrong with him. Meanwhile, Vara furtively opened the door and cautiously looked out. No one. She looked at the floor. Finding an oblong piece of paper on the threshold of her apartment, she frowned, puzzled, hastily picked it up and closed the door, not noticing Veniamin on her way. As a priceless burden, she carried the piece of paper into the room. Veniamin followed her. "Maybe you'll tell me at least who is this and what's going on?" With their challenge, he demanded. Then he softened, remembering that with such an approach, she would only become even more closed. "At least as an old friend," he asked. "Maybe there is something I can do to help?" Vara raised her head in surprise. She nodded absent-mindedly, sitting down on a bar stool in front of the counter, and began to study Sasha's message intently. The plane ticket she recognized, the date and time it emphasized, and on the back is his native and favorite handwriting. It read, "I love you and I'll be waiting for you. It's not what you think." Varvara froze, rereading their cherished lines for the umpteenth time. Oh yes, he had forgiven her, or even his kinsman had told him the truth. That the whole sordid affair had not happened at all, but he's still younger than her, and his brother is still her dark past. A stain that no amount of vanilla can wash away, which means it's going to come back to haunt her every time she sees him. And sooner or later, the reminders will accumulate so much that there will be a breakup with either her or his brother. Becoming between brothers is incapable. And to lose the beloved finally dissolved in him much more painful than now. Vara grinned. How much more painful? Even now she could hardly think how to live on without him. Veniamin watched the change in her expression silently and carefully. "Vara, talk to me," he suddenly said so sincerely and pitifully that the woman finally discharged from her worries and looked at the guest. "Ven, I don't know how to explain it so as not to fall into judgment on your constant teasing," she honestly admitted. "Well, that you have love, I noticed it," he sniggered. "But why you broke the comedy of agreeing to marry me again? I did not understand, and I'm offended." He pouted his lips childishly, causing her to smile softly. Varvara's doubts lasted only a minute, and then she decided that she had no one to talk but to him. Chapter 14. Veniamin, after listening to the moment of meeting with Rostislav, laughed until his stomach cramped. He apologized endlessly, but he couldn't stop. "Well, Vara, it could only happen to you," he exhaled, unsuccessfully trying to take a serious expression. Varvara frowned unhappily, crossing her arms on her chest. She smiled furtively as she pictured the whole farce from the outside. "I, of course, the party interested." Finally, he managed to regain focus and speak calmly, although sometimes he burst out a nervous laugh. "But objectively, I can't understand what prevents you from being together." Vara stared at him like a fool, not noticing the obvious. "What do you mean? What?" She amusingly jumped off the high chair and began to measure the room with steps. "We have an age difference. 8 years? Don't make me laugh at my horseshoes. That's no difference at all." But I'll grow old faster and sooner, she was stubborn, waiting with all her heart to agree with Venya's arguments. So what? First, I understood that he has enough money to maintain your external attractiveness. Secondly, not just one face is not the matter. Correct me if I'm lying, saying that the man chooses eyes, skeptically grinned Varya. You have a good option at your favorite man, he grinned back. Everything, of course, is true, but a wise woman will wait out foolishness. Because the face came and went, but deep affection and respect will remain. I don't agree with that. Yes, I know how much I do not agree, squeezed chuckled ex-husband. And third, at the end of life, we all die. If you're always afraid of it, we should not live today, following your logic. But think about it. Why deprive yourself of happiness now, if it will hurt someday, and not even then? Varvara thoughtfully ran her hand along her chin. She wanted to agree with him. All right, and what about Rostislav? What about Rostik? Well, you slept with him. I don't know why you're making such a big deal out of it. A week-long affair with a married man, and you didn't even know about his wife. Notice that he turned out to be a much tougher dog than me. She smiled, self-critical, but still. What's all the same? Venya freaked out, jumping up from his seat. He was going to marry her, and instead he is trying to persuade her to be with someone else. But life with a woman who loves another he could not imagine. But now she became a definitive, unattainable point of horizon. I don't understand why you look for reasons why you can't be with the man you love, instead of looking for a reason to be together. Venya, you don't understand. Varvara, in the heat of the argument, also stopped. Angrily looked into his eyes. Something in him trembled from his fiery look. He leaned over and kissed her, and if he wanted to make sure she was finally lost to him. She twitched in surprise. She didn't pull away or respond to the kiss. It was as if she were testing herself too. Yeah, the man summarized, calming down and taking a step back with the most peaceful smile possible in such situation. You were right. Nothing's going to work out with you and me. I'm sorry, she shrugged in response, feeling the weight of responsibility for someone else's fate fall off her shoulders, which she continued to carry even after her divorce from him. Anyway, that's it. When is the date of departure? Decisively spoke Veniamin, taking the ticket from her hands. Let's pack a suitcase. I will personally take you to the airport to make sure that you did get on the plane and flew towards your happiness. Varya looked incredulously at her ex. You think? Varya, don't piss me off. All your fears are surmountable and not a problem at all, if there is love. I saw his eyes. I never thought I'd say this, but he does love you. Then why did he fly away? The young woman asked timidly. Because he's a man, Varya. He has business there, and you are here driving a goat. Veniamin waved his arms, pushing her to the closet. Balaguril cheered up, but in his eyes lurked doubt. Really? Why did he leave? And what did that phrase of his about her not knowing anything mean? Intuition was blinking an alarm. But he wrote off the misgivings as jealousy and with redoubled zeal began to help with the packing. Then he looked in her suitcase, claimed all that stuff was worthless. and dragged her off on a shopping trip as a gift from an old friend for the beginning of her new life. Chapter 15. Alexander cast a controlling glance around the rented apartment. He had only spent a few nights in it. The rest of the time echoed in him with the sweet ache of memories in his chest. His grandfather's house was a perfect fit for their small and stolen happiness. A small suitcase was already standing in the hallway, but leaving this time did not work. After all, before he had happily ran away from the serpentarium cult family, now Varya was staying here. Of course, the sooner he left, the safer she would be. He would be able to deal with her stepfather sooner and come back for her if her beloved never decided to fly to him herself. The man smiled with grim determination. It was true that she knew nothing of his decision and the extremely convoluted family affairs. And during his absence, she could make up such passions that it would be frightening to imagine. Smiling gently at the thought of her, Sasha forced himself to go to the door. Earlier he would leave, earlier he would return. By agreement with the landlord, he would leave the keys with his neighbor. As soon as he grasped their doorknob, his cell phone vibrated insistently in his pocket. The number is temporary. Only the assistant in Germany and Varvara knew it. The latter is unlikely to call under the circumstances. And to contact the assistant, there must be a very good reason, usually an unpleasant one. What was his surprise when the display showed number hidden? What nonsense! He pressed answer but didn't say anything. An exhausted woman's voice was heard in the receiver. Sasha, don't hang up. It's Ella. I'm in trouble. Only you can help. And I have what you need. Alexander frowned wearily. For Elvira, to pure and pleasant voice, devoid of the usual femininity. If even it was her, the could be a trap. And there was no desire to help the main viper of the family. She'd done enough damage to him. But what he needed? What's she talking about? Or is she bluffing? What do you want? He asked sharply. Thank you, she exhaled with obvious relief. Can we meet? She asked hopefully. Okay, I have a plane in 2 hours. If you make it to the airport, I'll see you then. Stay near the cafe. I'll come to you myself. Ella hastily agreed and disconnected. Calling a cab and saying goodbye to the neighbor, Sasha went down to the exit, wondering if he had just made a mistake. However, his intuition was surprisingly calm. At the airport, he took a seat with a perfect view, waiting for her appearance at the large panoramic window, next to which the cafe was located. But Elvira did not appear. He began to think over ways of a retreat in case of the trap set by his stepfather, as suddenly someone timidly touched his shoulder. The man turned around and stared at the petite girl in front of him in bewilderment. Modestly dressed, with dark curly hair, she looked at him with wide-open eyes and held out a mini flash drive in her open palm. Sasha looked from the girl to the medium and back again in surprise. Are you from Elvira? Finally he asked wearily. I am Elvira. She couldn't resist an understanding smile. I don't understand why you are deceiving me, but Ella didn't let him finish. What you're used to seeing, he shoved the photo on her gadget under his nose, is just a convenient role of a fool. Everyone believed in the transformation into a so-called socialite, a headless doll with pumped-up tits and lips. Wig, makeup, and heels did the rest. And you've never even seen the real me, so I was prepared for the reaction. Alexander gave her an incredulous look. Too innocent, light and pure was her appearance. But the manicure was indeed Elvira's. He was used to picking up on details. The things she was wearing were expensive, though simple in cut, and the gadget in her sister's-in-law hands. He gingerly reached out for the flash drive. "What's in here?" "Evidence of your stepfather's guilt in our mom's death." "Sash, I'm so sorry." "How did you get my number?" The man was tinkering suspiciously. "It was indicated on the document, which you left for familiarization." Directly looking in his eyes, the girl replied and smiled sympathetically. "Small miscalculations make big defeats." "And why do you need it?" "He killed my mother too, once. And now he kidnapped Rostik and would have killed me if his idiots has recognized me as this doll." She grinned bitterly, pointed her finger at the same photo. Alexander looked at his interlocutor with interest. "I still don't understand everything, but you can fly with me if you are in danger, and on arrival we'll sort it out." "I don't think they're expecting that." Elvira shook her head negatively. "No, Sash, I thought I loved you." The man raised his eyebrows in surprise, hearing this confession and not knowing how to react. "But it turned out that closer to Rostik I have no one in the whole world. I'm not leaving him here alone." He glanced at the watch on his wrist. "I have another 20 minutes and I am eager to hear your version of events and backstory." "In short, of course," he said, figuring he had nothing to lose by doing so. "And there's no shortage of information." He caught himself thinking over the options for finding Rostislav, how habits affect him. After all, almost all his life he considered him a brother, not the most loving, alas, but a kinsman. When Elvira finished her hurried and little confused story, the puzzles in his head finally formed a disappointing but very plausible picture. The girl looked at him expectantly and added, "I'm glad that now freed from the illusion of feelings for you and did not have time to do bad things. But I'm willing to help you in any way I can to make up for the previous years." He nodded almost absent-mindedly, digesting what he'd heard. Suddenly a thought struck him. The mischievous gleam in his eyes made Ella wait for an adventurous plan. But she was ready for anything, just to get out of this game, in which the lives of people were at stake. "Tell me, where did you master the art of reincarnation?" the man asked me curtly. Not yet fully understanding his scheme, Elvira simply shrugged her shoulders and replied, "My mother was an actress. I wanted to become a doctor, but dropped out after her death. And some of the tricks of acting I came in handy." "Can you use them again?" Sasha grinned cheekily. "For the good of the common cause, of course." Chapter 16. Vara was stormily and tossed from extreme to extreme. She was flying on the wings of love, anticipating a meeting with the one and only conqueror of her heart. Then she began to dismantle the suitcase ready for departure, sure that all this was just another deception. Vina sighed heavily and with ostentatious fairness asked, Why should I do this? And then began to explain to his ex-wife that the happiness to love and to be loved, like a winning lottery ticket twice in the same hand, does not fall into the same hands. She nodded in agreement, but as soon as he left, she sank back into unhappy thoughts. Her imagination drew pessimistic pictures of her and Sasha's joint reality 10 years later. At one of these moments, on the eve of the day of departure, the doorbell rang. Veniamin had left an hour ago, and there was no one else to come. Frowning puzzled, she headed for the door, looked through the peephole. In front of the door, a petite girl in a t-shirt with the emblem of a well-known delivery service in the city was shuffling from foot to foot. Maybe Venya had ordered something, or was it from Sasha? At this thought, my heart raced in my chest like a madman and galloped with joy. "Delivery service," said the girl at the door, looking around cautiously. "I didn't order anything," Varya answered, muffled. The girl nodded and smiled, as if that was the reaction she had expected. "It's a girl from Alexander." The courier pretended to peek at the order form, remembering the name of the customer. Varvara was still a little incredulous, but smiled happily. On the edge of her mind flashed the thoughts that he had changed his mind and there might be a farewell letter in there. But if she chickened out and didn't open the door, it would only make things worse. She would fly in vain to a foreign country where no one would be waiting for her. She opened the door. She smiled welcomingly. "Where do you need to sign?" The courier took a step towards her, gently but confidently pushing the girl into the apartment and quickly closing the door behind her. Varya didn't even have time to react, as the uninvited guest began to throw off her t-shirt, cap and jeans with sneakers. She put her small burden on the nightstand in the hallway and did not stop talking. Varvara watched in shock. "We have 10 minutes to change places. In the package is a tape recorder with a recording for you from Sasha and the keys to the rental car." "But I have my own car," Varya objected for some reason, not understanding what was going on. The girl condescendingly hummed, pausing for a second, then continued. "You are in a terrible mess. Sasha wants to hide your safety while all this is resolved. Now don't just stand there. Put it all on and give me your clothes and suitcase. The suitcase is empty, of course. Put your stuff in my backpack." "I don't understand." On the verge of a nervous breakdown, exclaimed Varya. "And why should I believe you?" "Because you want to leave." Gradually irritated, Elvira barked. "And you want Sasha to leave," she added softer and more heartfelt. "And in the optimistic prospects of living together with him happily ever after. Now get a move on." "But I fly to him tomorrow." "Right." A girl took out a passport from her uniform lying on the floor. She opened it and showed Varya an exact copy of her own identity card. "Tomorrow you're flying to Sasha, I mean me, and you're staying here, safe. And this is your ticket for the train in 2 weeks." Elvira shoved the ticket at her. "Turn it over," she said. Varya obediently didn't want to require it of her. When she was the familiar handwriting, she gasped silently, covering her mouth with the palm of her hand. There were only 2 words on the back of the ticket. "Trust her." As if awakening from a trance, she rushed to her suitcase, hurriedly throwing everything out of it. She hastily pulled on the uniform of her saver, not even realizing that it was Elvira. It was truly ironic. Ella thought it best not to introduce herself, given the comical nature of the situation. Otherwise, it would have taken much longer to convince Vara. And her house had been under surveillance for days. But only the clever Veniamin, not even suspecting this role in what is happening, every time tangled under their feet. So Sasha's plan came in very handy. Dressed, Vara stretched across the construction site like a soldier on the formation in front of the commander. What's next? Blue Toyota, the address in the glove compartment, all the necessary things for 2 weeks in the trunk. In the backpack, the tape recorder with a message from Sasha and a letter from me. Please, don't screw this up. Otherwise, all his efforts will be in vain, and all our lives will be on the brink, Elvira said, heartfelt, looking her husband's former mistress straight in the eyes. And what about Vienna? Varvara asked. Oh yeah, give me your phone too. There is a new one in the glove compartment. Sasha will call as soon as it is safe. Varvara obediently handed over the communication device. She thought that if all this is a hoax, then Veniamin's number she remembered by heart. But she didn't even know Sasha's permanent number. You can't make it up on purpose. Fate has a very intricate sense of humor. Thank you, Varvara whispered uncertainly, slinging a backpack with a minimum of personal belongings and hygiene items onto her shoulders. She didn't know who the girl was. She did know the details of the danger, but the sincere concern, sympathy, and confidence in the visitor's gaze told her heart to trust the savior with the note from her lover, for Sasha's sake. For the sake of their future, in the possibility of which she wanted to believe so much. Chapter 17. Elvira looked around the apartment of her twice rival with interest. The life of Alexander's favorite woman and Rostislav's short-term mistress turned out to be, in her opinion, modest and boring. It was here that Ella was to spend the night for an early morning flight to Germany. With someone else's identity, someone else's documents, and someone else's suitcase. In essence, they were both thieves. Only Varvara did it unknowingly, finding herself first in her husband's bed and then in the heart of her favorite man. No matter what she told Rostik and Sasha, she still loved the youngest of her brothers. It was for his sake that she had agreed to this adventure, and even more, without the knowledge and approval of her beloved, complicated the agreed scheme. If she survives and everything goes well, Sasha will grumble, but will be grateful. And if not, well, everyone she cares about is unavailable. And to live unequivocally, it is worth living for the sake of loved ones. Elvira opened the overhead kitchen cupboards in search of lost-leaf tea. She found only tea bags. At first she wrinkled her nose, but then she grinned. She was quick to pick up expensive habits. I made tea, found some chocolates. Varvara obviously didn't indulge in sweets. That's funny, and Sasha has a sweet tooth. They are so different. What keeps them together? Sex? I don't think so. Vara doesn't seem like a passionate woman. She is bland and uninitiative. Maybe Sasha likes such women. grudgingly grumbled, reluctantly put on the pre-prepared details of the new image, and deliberately went to the window. Their unwilling rival should have time to get to a safe place. She grinned at the sight of the outside civilians. They are not exactly hiding, apparently counting on Varvara's ignorance in such matters. It is going things they are almost identical in build. Vara's a little taller, though, but heels will save the situation this time. Ella moved away from the window and began to write a note to Veniamin. Tomorrow he could come. He'll see the stranger in Varvara's place and start asking stupid questions. Out loud, of course. And the phones have long been tapped. Quite pleased with herself, Elvira leaned back in her chair and once again reread the finished message. Great. Now she needed to think over the details of the part of the plan she had arbitrarily tweaked after the conversation with Alexander. Chapter 18. At the given address, Varya was surprised to find Sasha's grandfather's house. It seemed strange to her, and the girl decided to listen to the audio recording and read the letter before entering the familiar cozy rooms. Her heart was still pounding frantically in her chest, and her mind refused to recognize the impending danger. It's only in the movies that such passion rage. Real life is usually quiet, grey, measured. Who would want to harm, even if not ordinary but ordinary financier? Varya's trembling hand reached for the passenger seat, where the mysterious parcel was lying unopened. Tortured by doubts and fears, I unfolded the brown paper. There was indeed a letter and the tape recorder in the box. She missed her lover's voice so terribly that she decided to start by listening to the recording. Varya, it sounded from the speaker, and goosebumps of pleasure rushed over her skin. It was as if he were there, running his hand over her naked body, touching her exposed nerves. In the next 15 minutes of the recording, Alexander managed to put in the entire retelling of his bleak childhood, adolescence, and young adulthood. The tragedy of his family, the fate of his fragile and so beautiful and wise mother became a living picture in front of her tear-filled eyes. For the sake of this record and the realization of their plan with Ella, the man had to check in and escape from the airport shortly before his flight. The trains with several connections also came up, though they tried him out much more. Varya put away the recorder, looking lost at the picturesque area through the windshield of the rented car, which, by the way, was to be picked up the other day by Veniamin from the neighboring village. He had to return the car to the car dealership. Thus, all the strings leading to her were lost. Sasha and her assistant, in fact, thought out everything to the last detail. She could only marvel. Her grandfather's house was outlawed. Sasha was still in the process of drawing up the documents for it, fortunately very slowly. That's why the stepfather didn't know about it, and that's why the house was the safest place. In addition, as a child who caught the war, grandfather provided and ways of retreat. Just in case, Varya listened carefully again, where the entrance to the secret labyrinth under the house leading to the highway, secretly hoping that this knowledge will never be useful to her. Sashenka, she murmured fondly, listening to the tape for the umpteenth time and unable to find the strength to enter the house without him. After a while, however, Varya forced herself to read the letter. Weeping her tears, she carefully unfolded the sheet and froze in surprise. "Hello, Varya. You would hardly have believed me and listened to me, but now you are safe and I can speak openly. It's me, Elvira." The details in the audio recording and the letter left Varya stunned. These two had been through so much that her blood ran cold, so young and so cruelly beaten by fate. Varya powerlessly lowered her hands and the letter skirted to the floor, to the pedals. The girl dropped her head on her hands on the steering wheel. Tightly covering her eyes from the piling up of information and worries, Varya thought about the fact that everything in the story was wrong. Never before had she supposed that she was capable of such strong experience and vivid emotions. Elvira and Alexander had so many things in common. Common troubles, temperament, age after all. That's who he was supposed to be with. They are so much alike, but they don't even notice it. Or do they? A sharp prick of jealousy made the girl wince and lift her head. She was reminded of Elvira's plea not to make mistakes. Right, she would follow instructions now, and then, when they were all out of trouble, she could think about everything else. That's right, but only to cope with Sasha will be a couple with Elvira, while she will be holed up in a cozy house on the outskirts of some village under the supervision of her ex-husband. Varvara laughed hysterically. Her nerves had given out. I can't think of anything on purpose. Her ex-husband would look after her while the wife of her former lover would help her favorite man to survive. Nonsense, indeed. Angrily tapping her palms on the steering wheel, Varya resolutely ordered herself to gather her thoughts and stop hysterics. It worked. Bored and practical, she glanced at herself in the rearview mirror. Everything was going to be okay because it's already bad. She opened the car door, grinned at her reflection that she was alone with for the next few days. She winked playfully at her reflection and kicked off her shoes to feel alive again, treading the green blood toward home. Chapter 19. Elvira put a finger to her lips, urging the dazed Veniamin to silence, and poked him with a sheet with the message she had prepared yesterday. She didn't feel like babysitting this big-haired boy. She hadn't slept much, feeling wrecked, nervous about what was to come. But now, gazing at Veniamin, she understood Varvara perfectly well. Alexander was much younger, but much more courageous, strong, self-confident. With him it was not necessary to be endlessly the mommy of a creature that had lost a sock somewhere. She instilled a sense of security and peace. Ella thought sadly of Rostislav. Her husband, too, could not be called truly manly, a protector. More often he needed protection himself, if not directly, then indirectly, and Elvira had to repeatedly deflect the thunder and lightning on her father-in-law from the helpless Rostik. Even now she lied to him that she loved him to continue to fight for life and freedom from the tyrant father, for he was too inert, too soft-hearted. Tell her that she is still crazy about Sasha, and Rostik would have immediately dropped his hands and surrendered, becoming a villainous puppet in the hands of a soulless puppeteer. Well, she'll babysit the man a little longer, and then just disappear from the horizon. Unless a timid hope for reciprocity on the part of Alexander was still warming in her chest. After all, he may notice a spark in her, respond sympathy after all the joint experience. Could it be that even such devotion on her part could not convince the man to reconsider his attitude? Elvira sighed tiredly and carefully rubbed her trembling forehead with her hand, remembering that the makeup had already been appealed, the curtain had been raised, and the first act of the play had begun. It was impossible to retreat. Veniamin carefully reread the message addressed to him and nodded. Uncomplainingly, he took the phone out of his pocket and put it on the nightstand in the hallway. Varichka, the man started but stammered. He was preparing a farewell speech for a real Varvara. He wanted her to remember him strong and unbroken, even if he was starting a new life with someone else. But now all words seemed empty, and the very eyes of a stranger opposite brought sadness. "Varusha, I miss you," said the man, not too confidently, "but I want you to be happy, for all of us." Had he known how much he had hit the mark, and how many unhappy people the plane of happiness that took off with Varusha on board was leaving behind. "I cannot fly," Elvira played along, carefully copying Varina's uncertain notes in her voice. "It's already decided. You can't change your mind. Sasha is waiting for you." Veniamin jumped up, taking the suitcase from the girl's hands. It was too light. He looked at Ella with a puzzled look and asked a mute question with a nod of his head. She shrugged indifferently. Things were not part of her plan, but he didn't need to know that. Arriving at the airport, a little startled to find that the surveillance continued. For the first time during the realization of her and Sasha's plan, the girl thought that they might have miscalculated. What if she didn't even make it to her destination? Noting the doubts, quite reliable restraint hugged Vara's former spouse, warmly said goodbye to him, reminding him of the need to follow instructions. Passed through check-in, took her seat on board the airplane. Fortunately, her seat was by the window, as she liked. Exhaled a sigh of relief when the ground was far below them, carrying her higher and farther away from her hometown. Would she ever come back? Not likely, but she felt no pity either. It was as if she had cut off the past in an instant and left it to rot in the junkyard of human destinies. The two jocks were a few seats away from her. It was nice that they too had bothered to buy tickets in advance, in a second class, together with Vara. "I wonder why Sasha hadn't booked her a business class ticket," Elvira hummed. She calculated the time until boarding and diligently imbibed water and cola, trying to keep the legend for plausibility. 10 minutes before boarding, she walked uncertainly towards the restroom with only her purse in her hands. "I hastily washed off my makeup, and the wig, which was no longer needed, went into the trash under a pile of used toilet paper. The hated false sleeves and pouch-up took their rightful place." She smiled again, as if mad anticipant Alexander's anger at her self-will. She had to think bigger, with more scope. Let Daddy choke on it. Taking the second ticket out of her purse, she went to the business class and confidently took her seat. The neighbor looked at the girl in surprise. "I had motion sickness the whole flight," she shrugged playfully in response to the unasked question and folded her lips in a bow. "I am sick of this image." The fake passport in Varvara's name was left on the previous seat. If Veniamin didn't get anything wrong, another one of these went with him on an unscheduled vacation by train, in the opposite direction, and stayed in a seat too. "Come on, play hide-and-seek with me, Andrei Yegorovich." Elvira grinned gloatingly, quite pleased with herself. Chapter 20. Entering the airport building with the model's gate, Elvira tried very hard to be noticed by the confused spies. She spotted them at once in the welcoming crowd and smiled contentedly. The plan worked. "I can't find my luggage anywhere," she said capriciously and loudly to the staff. "Can you describe it, color, size of the suitcase?" the woman at the luggage counter asked patiently. She obviously didn't like the flirtatious blonde, but her job obliged her to observe the rules of behavior with passengers. They, alas, were different and not always well-mannered and friendly. Ella pretended to think, murmuring. Out of the corner of her eyes, she noticed that one of Andrei Yegorovich's guards was watching her closely, while the other was frantically scouring the building in search of Varvara. Well, good luck," she chuckled. "Did you manage to remember?" the airport employee reminded herself. "Oh, yes, I remembered. I forgot my suitcase at home." She twirled a curl around her finger in frustration. The men in the queue laughed when they heard this answer. Some smiled demurely, others laughed at the top of their voices. But most of them were unanimous in the desire to make acquaintance with this silly but very sexy person. Elvira smiled coquettishly at everyone and no one at the same time, carefully doing her best to be remembered. Then she confidently stamped her heels into the women's restroom, where she hurriedly removed the elements of her image. Handbag, paraphernalia, and accessories went into a bag. Comfortable belly flats on her feet made her moan out loud with pleasure. "You've lost all shame," loudly indignant woman from a neighboring stall. Elvira was amused by this reaction. Well, everyone thinks in the measure of his promiscuity. She clamped her mouth with the palm of her hand so as not to let out a burst of laughter. She'd check the stalls more carefully in the future. Adrenaline was rushing through her blood. Her head was buzzing. Her whole body felt incredibly light. She felt like she could do anything. The girl pulled her car lower, hiding half of her face under the visor. "The show must go on," she whispered, smiled crookedly, and headed for the exit. She broke her heel on the way to the door, one less instrument of torture. Then she jumped out of the bathroom, looked around, and rushed into the thick of the crowd, following the movement of her father-in-law's bodyguards. "Help!" Elvira shouted loudly, throwing aside a broken shoe. "She's a thief! She stole my backpack!" "Who?" a few people looked around and asked sympathetically. "The tall blonde. She ran that way. I jabbed my finger in the direction where I had thrown my shoe a minute earlier." A couple of men and Andrei Yegorovich's guards rushed in that direction. "Now we're playing Cinderella." Elvira smirkled, satisfied, and hurried to the exit. Her hat and zippered sweater immediately went into the trash. Down rustled the sundress, the skirt of which was hidden under the sweater. Her hair fell over her shoulders in waves. I wanted to massage my scalp, enjoying the desired freedom. They managed to catch a cab at the curb very quickly. The girl dived into the salon a second before the jocks, who had finally darkened, panted and jumped out into the street. The nearest beauty parlor, Elvira sneered at the driver and he nodded obediently, starting the engine. Her heart, like a frantic heartbeat, was beating in her chest to the rhythm of the chase, happiness, and euphoria. Now she should be free from all of them at once. Both girls, her fathers-in-law, could not search for them till the end of the century. She was sure that Sasha would be able to do it, and he would have enough evidence to put the murderer in jail. She smiled sadly at the image of her mother in her mind and once again said goodbye to the past. She felt that now she had done everything she could to restore justice, and she was grateful to fate for the opportunity to speed things up. On the way, they stopped at a cafe. Ella bought some pretzels and coffee for herself and the driver. She discreetly sent a bag with the wig and false sleeves to the trash. Elvira's passport with the marriage stamp went there as well. In the salon, she enthusiastically plumped into the chair and put herself in the hands of a complete stranger hairdresser, who was captivated by her sincere, open smile. Short hair dyed to match the gray was something she'd always wanted to try, but before she'd had to look over her family's opinion. Now she was free. She lovingly stroked her real passport, hidden in the pocket of her shorts under her sundress, kept in the safe place all these years. Ella Vasilkova, you're back. Chapter 21. While Ella was starting her life with a clean slate, and Andrei Yegorovich was rushing around like a hungry tiger in a cage, having received a report from his subordinates about the two missing girls, Varvara couldn't find a place for herself from excitement. Tomorrow she must hand over the car to Veniamin at the agreed place. According to the plan of Elvira and Alexander, she should leave the keys in the glove compartment, and the car should be parked near the lake. To return to the house is not so far. Besides, walking, as Varvara hoped, would help her put her thoughts and feelings in order. Right now the emotions were raging like waves in a storm. She was choking on the salty moisture of her own tears. Air was catastrophically lacking, as well as a reliable support. Sasha's confident hand. The girl was worried about his safety, but no less worried about the fact that she might simply be forgotten. She realized that the assumption was absurd, but the complexes conspired against her and rolled all at once, painting in her imagination a picturesque scene of beautiful children of Ella and Sasha in their joint happily future. Without her, jealousy and insecurity ate away at her, sapped her mental strength, and gnawed at her hope for a good outcome like a sweet tooth. Sashenka, call me. Give at least some news about yourself, the girl begged, walking through the garden. But the phone was troublingly silent. Maybe it's time to just take life into their own hands and stop waiting for decisions from other people. Suddenly, right now, Sasha is in dire need of her, and she's just chilling here. Overwhelmed by this thought, Varya braked sharply near the car. Yes, she had a clear instruction not to use the ticket until Sasha made himself known. Otherwise, to stay in the shelter until he called. But how could she stay safe if somewhere out there her beloved man was risking himself for their well-being? What if she and Elvira just made it all up for her to get away with it? She's smart. She'll figure it out on her own and disappear from their lives. Varvara stubbornly shook her head, driving away the intrusive doubts. Sasha would not do that to her. On the other hand, what did she know about him? Not from his stories and the audio recording. Nothing. Ruffling her hair in despair, she sat down straight on the grass. The train is the day after tomorrow. She has time to think about everything again, including thinking about how she would look for Sasha in a strange country if he didn't meet her. Late at night, a melodious trill woke up to different people at different ends of the city. Vara received the long-awaited message. Come, it's safe. Andrei Yegorovich snorted irritably. He couldn't sleep, contemplating his next move. Another glass of amber liquid stood on the armrest of his chair. An expensive cigar from a unique collection smoked in the ashtray. The ringing of the doorbell was too unfortunate. He glanced at his watch, wondering who would risk disturbing his peace at this hour. Perhaps their underhanded bodyguards had finally gotten on the girl's trail and were ready to give him some good news. With a satisfied smirk on his face, he opened the front door. He was immediately knocked to the floor. "Get down!" An unfamiliar voice with a foreign accent shouted above him. "Special services are at work." The man wrinkled his nose. He tried to reach for his phone to send an SOS message that had been set up on his phone for a long time, but he was prevented from moving. "Stay calm," the same voice urged. Then, quite politely considering the situation, he was lifted from the marble floor and led into his own room. Andrei Yegorovich was angry and perplexed. "Who are you, and by what right are you breaking into my house?" He tried to maintain the position of the master, but faltered under the confident gaze of the man opposite. "International Security Service. I advise you to remain silent, because right now we are looking at 20 years in prison. Don't make it any worse." "Can I at least call my lawyer?" the landlord asked almost politely. "I'm afraid not." The uninvited guest shook his head. A smirk flashed through the slits of his balaclava, and his gaze flashed with a dangerous spark. "You're violating my rights," Andrei Yegorovich stubbornly stumbled. "Fine, you can discuss it with your cellmates after the story about the rape of Diana Vasilkova, the murder of your wife, and financial fraud with the city budget." There was a tense silence in the room. "You're bluffing," mumbled the accused. "And this you should discuss with the investigators and the judge." The enforcer was clearly losing patience. He was tired of pointless bickering. He had heard them so many times over the years of his work. It was a matter of honor for him to catch such balls. And they always looked the same, like executioners who had suddenly become victims, pathetic and helpless in the face of justice. Sighing tiredly, the man headed for the exit, handing the detainee over to his man. Pulling off his mask as he walked, he wiped his forehead with his hand. The glovelets were annoying. Now he would travel thousands of kilometers, get home on his thirsty iron horse, and his mother would cry again, happy that he had returned alive. She will hustle, gathering a meal for her son, hungry after a long journey. And in the morning he will again learn that another scoundrel needs his punishing sword of justice. Will this vicious cycle ever end? Chapter 22. Just 2 words. Vara stared at the screen of her phone as if mesmerized. Come over, it's safe. If safe, why didn't he call? He didn't say that he loved her, that he would meet her and where exactly he would meet her. Yes, he's always reserved in words. It's hard to hear sweet, diminutive and fondling appeals from him, and they don't suit him. It happens that a person does not suit some manner of a behavior, looks not natural. Here in Sasha, a surprisingly gentle, attentive, passionate lover, during the day caring, best restrained in words. Maybe he fell out of love? Then why does he call me? I won't go. I won't find out. Varvara decided to begin to pack her belongings. She was sincerely proud of him, so quickly to be able to solve a problem of such magnitude. He is truly brilliant, even though he is so young. The girl didn't doubt him in the slightest, but she doubted herself infinitely. Would she be able to be a worthy match for him? Wouldn't he get bored? Why did you do it? Alexander shook his head sadly, looking at Ella, who sat opposite with the most satisfied look. The new image suited her well, making her even more charming and attractive. He would not deny it for aesthetic reasons, but that was not what she was to him. His heart yearned for the one and only Varvara he loved. I bet she won't venture in here and wait for your call, Ella grinned playfully. The girl's real name still caught the ear, though it was consonant with the fake one. 5 minutes ago, you tried to argue with me that she would never have risked herself to come here without hearing from me, Sasha snorted. What are you trying to do? What are you trying to prove? After the young man refused to argue that Varya would not stand for it and would or would not come without his call, Ella said that the room was cold and demanded tea. While he naively brewed his unexpected guest a warming beverage, she managed to text Varya. He was annoyed, for she had deprived him of the opportunity to break the important news himself. But at the same time, he was grateful, because he himself could still long delay the arrival of his beloved, constantly doubting that not all the accomplishments of his father were caught. There was still a certain amount of danger. I am sorry, Ella shrugged, completely unrepentant. Her short curls bounced and settled back into place. You miss her, and the stepfather's already in jail. There is no point in dragging this out any longer. Sasha looked at the girl doubtfully. He thought he understood her true motives. He decided to check his assumptions. Okay, I'm even grateful. I'd be in doubt for a long time myself, he said and looked in her intently. Don't you want to know where Rostislav is and what's wrong with him? Ella squinted, fiddled as if she had eaten a slice of lemon. Let Elvira worry about him, his wife, who he never loved and did not really appreciate. The interlocutor grumbled resentfully. I'm a free girl. I have nothing to do with him. Come on, Alexander smiled, convinced of the correctness of his guesses. Passport is not the whole reality. You can't erase the past with an eraser. Who would say? He snorted by thought about what she had heard. I'm leaving tomorrow, she said, seriously waiting for his reaction. Where to? Sasha frowned. She constantly put him in a deadlock by abrupt changes of mood and events. It doesn't matter, Ella waved away. She still hadn't decided where she was going unless he tried to stop her. She had enough money for a long time. She'd been saving it in an account in her real name, but she hasn't bought a ticket yet. The main thing is, will you come to see me off? Sasha thoughtfully ran his palm on the edge of the table. His sister-in-law was suddenly on his side of the barricades in a battle with the real monster. And he was unspeakably grateful for that, but he also realized that she did not do it unselfishly. First, of course, personal score. Secondly, himself. Arrogance and self-confidence were alien to him, but only a blind man would not have noticed that she had lied at the airport when she said that her love for him was in the past. So what could he do to avoid hurting her, but also to avoid giving her false hope? There was a reason she'd shown up at his place late at night and sat up late into the night, heatedly discussing the details of her now ex-father-in-law's arrest. What time is your train or plane? Ella instantly seized on the glue. Train. I'll text you the time. I don't remember. I'll look on the ticket. She lied desperately, trying to remember what time Varvara would arrive. The girl understood perfectly well that she should appear in the horizon and Sasha would be forever unavailable to her. Ella, thank you for your help, the man nodded. She laughed sadly. I got it. Thank you. Get out of here. I'm tired. She glanced at the clock in her gadget studded with diamonds, the only thing that was thoughtfully left from her past life. It's late. I've been up late. Indeed, it's time to go to bed. She glanced languidly from under her eyelashes, hinting that it was not necessary to leave. Sasha looked straight ahead without the slightest shadow of lust. He was silent. Ella sighed heavily and stood up. I was glad to be on the same team with you, because you are really cool. Sasha grinned. What do you plan to do now? He asked, walking his guest to the door. Ella shrugged uncertainly again. I think to continue my studies, but I haven't made up my mind about my profession. The last choice was obviously not a good one. Alexander nodded, taking it into consideration. Brotherly hugged the girl, sincerely hoping that she would find her happiness with someone else. Closing the door behind her, he began to plan the day of the meeting with his beloved with pleasure. Chapter 23. The meet and greet area was swarming with people like an anthill. The hum of laughter, voices, and outside sounds made Sasha shiver. Noise and bustle invariably caused of him a desire to be as far away as possible, in silence and measured action, where everything was clearly planned, predictable and understandable. At the last moment, he ordered a train ticket for Vara instead of an airplane, sent it to her a mail and called her. He was afraid of her wariness in the first seconds of the conversation, but managed to quickly understand the reason for this mood and dispel the next fears of his beloved. At the end of their conversation, her voice was a happy music for his longed-for soul, and there was still time to wait for his arrival. Ella postponed her departure, saying that she wanted to wait for Vara and make sure that she had not risked herself for her in vain. Sasha remained silent, but he didn't agree with that statement. Everyone had a personal motive. But if it is so easier for her to bear his indifference, then the man does not mind. The train should have arrived by now, but the famous German punctuality had failed again. 10 minutes ago, the dispatcher had warned that the flight would be delayed indefinitely. Ella was shuffling from foot to foot, impatiently glancing at her watch. There was less and less time left before her train. Sasha, I'm leaving for good. She tucked her sleeve in her last hope. Let's at least say goodbye to you. with a pleading look into his eyes. Alexander straightened tensely. Ella, Vara will be here now and will walk you to the train together. We have each other's cell phones and mail, we won't get lost. Are you a fool, Sashka? The girl flared up, attracting the unwanted attention of others. I love you. Sasha angrily pressed his lips, trying to keep his composure. I understand, he replied quietly, and I understand that you are hurt and offended right now. But Ella, I don't love you. If it's my fault, I'm sorry. I really hope that someday you will be able to understand me, having become happy with another man, and we can be family friends. Ella had expected him to say those words, but it didn't make the pain any less. It was burning in her chest. She wanted to yell at him and hit him, kiss him and hug him, all at the same time. Sasha, she lowered her head guiltily. You're right, of course. She smiled softly, pleased that it was relatively easy to get through to her. He was pleased to hear the sound of an approaching train. The girl raised her head fearfully. Give me a hug goodbye, please. I will not wait for Vara, she asked with tears in her eyes. Your happiness hurts me. I understand, Alexander nodded sympathetically. I am sorry if I offended you, and take care of yourself. He hugged her like a little sister, but Ella suddenly gustily reached for him, wrapped her arms around his neck, and kissed him greedily, passionately. Stunned by the surprise, Sasha could not move for a first minute. He stood there with his eyes closed in heavy disappointment. This is not love, just mania, the desire to get unattainable. Pity the girl, but following her lead won't help her. He heard someone chuckle beside him. He would have grinned himself if not for the fact that when he opened his eyes, he ran into the gaze of Varvara's deep eyes. A light travel bag fell at her feet, but she didn't care. She was in such a hurry, searching for him with her eyes in the crowd, following the call of her heart. To find the man she loved kissing another, beautifully sexy, young, bald. She wasn't even her rival. Varvara swallowed hard, recognizing the obvious defeat. Sasha abruptly pulled away from Ella, who was wrapped around him like a liana. He rushed to his beloved, cursing. The people on the platform openly giggled, watching what was happening. Vara, the man exclaimed in desperation. She put both hands forward, blocking his path. She took a step back. Sasha froze. It was dangerous for her to retreat any further, and her safety was more important than his feelings. He looked at Varvaras in confusion, trying to find words, realizing how absurd any explanation was now. He glanced angrily at the pleased Ella, who was grinning victoriously. Don't shut yourself in again. Talk to me, Sasha asked. I love you madly, and today Ella is leaving. She came to meet you with me, and suddenly, God, what am I talking about? He hid his face in his hands, gathering his strength. Vara suddenly touched his wrist gently with her hand, pulling him aside, and gently looked into his eyes. I love you too, she nodded understandingly, and that's why you are free. Happiness to you. Her heart ached as she silently picked up her bag in front of the astonished audience, who had not gotten the desired spectacle, noticing Ella's incomprehensive stare. Remaining silent, she walked past them, heading for a cab. It turned up too quickly, and Vara too easily found common ground with the driver in English and sped off in an unknown direction before Sasha could realize it. It's a big city, and she could be anywhere right now. The thought of getting a surveillance tape to prove what? He replayed the events in his head and realized that tapes would only make things worse. He'd hugged Ella first and then she'd kissed him. He glared angrily at the quiet girl. "Don't let anyone get you, do you?" he asked, ironically coming closer. "I was hoping the meanness was just part of your Elvira image. I'll make things right in my life, but my offer of friendship is no longer valid for you," he said as if cut off. Without waiting for her answer, Sasha passed by, desperately puzzling over how to find Varvara now. Vara herself, who had played out the situation with the cab driver, froze at the entrance to the station. She was surprised to see her lover reprimanding Ella. She didn't hear the words, but well studied his facial expressions and gestures. Then he left and Ella stayed. She burst into tears, literally collapsing onto the bench behind her. The girl gave it to a mental impulse and walked back. Quietly dropped the bag in the front of her and sat down beside her. She put her arm around Ella's shoulders, bending the shivering lover to her. Oh, how she sympathized with her, how she understood. Had Sasha abandoned them both? "Don't cry," she asked quietly. "Everything will be all right. Words are empty, of course, but I've already experienced shocks and I know that." Ella suddenly raised her head, pulled away sharply, and gave her comforter a frankly angry look. "I did, of course. When you were climbing into my husband's luxurious bed," she jabbed. "Don't tell me you didn't know." Varvara recoiled. Tears of despair and guilt came to her eyes before the whole world at once, and this fragile girl in front of her in particular. After all, she had stolen her happiness twice, both times out of ignorance, but that didn't make her feel any better. "I'm sorry," Vara mumbled. Strong and warm hands put their arms around her shoulders and pulled her to him. Even without turning around, she easily recognized Sasha by his touch, perfume, short sleeves. "And now, Ella, you tell me the truth, by yourself," he firmly commanded. Vara shrank into a lump. "Why did you come back?" she asked almost in a whisper. "Because you have nowhere to go in a foreign country, because I didn't feel you were far away. Because someday you'd come back to the train station to live, and I'm not letting you go anywhere." Ella blinked in surprise, stopping crying. She was finally convinced that for these two, anyone was a third person. She sighed heavily, repentantly lowered her head, and honestly confessed everything to her rival. Suddenly it became easier when indifference to her husband, hatred for her father-in-law, sadness for her mother, and love for a stranger Sasha turned into words. All the time of her little confession, Vara was silent and did not dare to move. "The darkest time comes just before dawn," she said, realizing that Ella would add nothing more. She sat down beside her again. "I didn't love my husband either. His betrayal hurt my pride more than my heart. I didn't love Rostislav either, trying to live like everyone else, to build some kind of relationship with a supposedly free man. But it's all deceitful love, and resentment is deceitful." She was silent, not knowing what else to say. Ella sobbed, staring absent-mindedly at the couple in front of her. "I'm on my train in 10 minutes, she said offhandedly. "Promise to be happy?" the girl asked sadly. Vara squeezed her lover's palm, embracing her. She felt him nod. It made her heart flutter enthusiastically. "I promise," she said quietly and solemnly. Ella rose from the bench, nodded goodbye to them, and without turning around, went off to find her platform and her place in life. Vara turned to Alexander. He gently took her face in his palms and asked, "Now promise the same to me, because I can't imagine my life without you." I love you, Sasha. Now she was crying with happiness, gladly putting her lips to her excruciatingly sweet kiss and promising herself never to doubt him again.